Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 1. Patton had just been getting himself groceries. He was planning on making homemade macaroni and cheese for himself this weekend, and went around the store grabbing all kinds of different cheeses, some of which he did not recognize the names of and might not actually make good macaroni and cheese, but how could he resist the cute little goats on it, and the little mini shell pasta? He also picked up some heavy cream and then headed to the cash registers with his spoils. He'd been a bit distracted with his plans for cooking when he'd gotten into the car to drive home and hadn't been paying as much attention as he probably should have. The next thing he knew, there was a knife at his throat. He paused. "Hi?" he said tentatively. "Put your keys in the ignition and drive," a dark voice said in his ear. Patton took a deep breath. "Sure," he said, reaching forward to slowly do as the man asked. "Any particular direction we're going in?" I don't know. Just drive," he said. "I'll decide later." "All right," Patton agreed and put the car in reverse. "Can I turn my head to make sure I'm not backing into anything?" he asked. The knife retreated a bit in answer. Patton turned his head slowly and looked back while letting his foot off the brake, and quickly scanned his new friend out of the corner of his eye. There wasn't much to be seen. He had a dark hoodie covering most of his frame, but a few tufts of dark hair stuck out of it, framing a pale face with a streak of blood down his cheek and a purpling bruise near his eye. Patton didn't indicate that he'd seen any of this, instead choosing to turn back to face front and drive out of the grocery store parking lot. The knife returned after that, though it didn't touch him this time, it just hovered. Patton chose to drive toward the interstate, careful to keep his hands on the steering wheel and make no sudden movements. "Why are you getting on the interstate?" the man behind him asked. There was caution in his tone, but he didn't seem too suspicious of the move. "You wanted me to drive, and I don't know where or how long. There's a lot more driving to do out here than in town," Patton explained. "Is that okay?" He responded. "Yeah, sure." So Patton continued to drive. Eventually, the knife started to retreat a bit, though it was still there. About 30 minutes into the ride, Patton decided it was okay to speak. "Would you like to come sit in the passenger seat?" he asked softly. "You can lean the knife across the console at my side. It'd probably be a bit more comfortable." The knife returned to Patton's neck. "No," he said firmly. "Okay," Patton agreed calmly. Yet, despite his initial reaction, it was less than 5 minutes later that the knife dropped a bit again. "I'm moving to the front seat," he grumbled. Patton suppressed a smile. There was shifting around in the back, and then a body threw itself up into the passenger seat. He scrambled into a sitting position and rushed to point the knife back at Patton. Patton just kept driving. After a few minutes, he relaxed a bit again. Patton bit back the words, "Put your seatbelt on," and instead said, "Figured out where we're going yet?" He replied. "Do you know any places associated with Green Bellow Foods?" "There's an abandoned factory near Livington. Would that work?" "Yeah," he nodded. "Let's go there." "Okay, but fair warning, it is about a 3-hour drive from here." "Great," he hissed. Patton glanced over at him. He was still just a blob of black fabric for the most part, as the hoodie still covered most of his body. But when he looked over at Patton, he revealed a bit more of his face. Patton was surprised by how young it looked. He looked like a teenager, likely not even a legal adult. "Since we're going to be driving for a while," Patton broached after a few more minutes to let him settle in the front seat, "can we get something to eat? I have a lot of cheese in the bag, but I'm lactose intolerant, so that's probably not a good idea for a closed car." The boy started. "If you're lactose intolerant, why do you have an entire bag full of just cheese?" "And heavy cream and shell pasta. I was going to make mac and cheese when I get home." "That doesn't answer the question." Patton noticed that the knife had drifted away from him as they spoke. "I like cheese," Patton said with a shrug. "Anyway, I can go through a drive-through," he tempted. Patton saw him bite his lip nervously out of the corner of his eye. "Fine, sure, I guess. Just, you're going to have to use cash so no one can track your credit card." "Okay then," Patton agreed with a small smile in his direction. "We'll get off at the next exit." Yeah, okay," he said. Don't try any funny business?" Oh, goodness, he was a baby. "Of course not." Signs for the next exit started popping up a few minutes later. They passed a blue sign with a couple of restaurant emblems on it. Looks like your options are Wendy's, Chick-fil-A, Hardee's, or Freddy's. What are you thinking? I don't know. I don't care. You have to have some preference, Patton said. Go ahead and pick. He hesitated. Maybe Freddy's? I don't think I've tried that before. Sounds good, Patton chirped. He pulled off at the exit into a medium-sized town. The exit dumped them straight onto the town's main street, and Patton could see the sign for Freddy's a bit down the road. So, Patton fished while they were stuck at a red light. Why Green Bellow Foods? No reason. Why do you care? He asked, suddenly intense and defensive. Whoa, Patton placated. I'm just curious. I'm the one driving you over 3 hours to get there, after all. I just wondered why. Right, the boy said, curling in a bit on himself. After a moment he mumbled, My dad knew the owner. Did he now? Patton thought. He didn't comment on the use of the word knew. The light turned green and Patton glanced over at him. How old are you? He asked. You don't need to know. Patton hummed as the light turned green. What if I guess and you tell me if I'm right? He didn't respond, instead crossing his arms over his chest defensively. Let's see, Patton said anyway, glancing over at him. 12? What? No, I'm 15. Then he paused. Hey! 15, huh? Patton asked. Is that why you didn't just steal a car? You don't know how to drive? His new friend gave him a wounded look that edged on a pout. What do you want to eat? Patton asked. He bit his lip. What type of food is there? Mostly burgers and fries, but also chicken sandwiches and hot dogs and ice cream. Well, frozen custard, but ice cream. Just order me a cheeseburger and fries. And ice cream! I don't need ice cream, he mumbled. Well, I'm getting ice cream. Do whatever you want, he grumbled. Patton narrowed his eyes at him. The kid wanted, no, he needed ice cream, Patton decided. Patton pulled into the Freddy's drive-thru and ordered 2 burgers with fries and drinks and a Dirt and Worms concrete. Patton reached for his wallet, and the boy startled, but he didn't instinctively reach for the knife, Patton noted. Just getting my wallet, Patton soothed, continuing to move slowly to take it out. He flipped open his wallet and took out a $20 bill. The boy relaxed again. Patton greeted the drive-thru worker with a cheery, hello, and exchanged the money for their food before thanking the employee and driving off. He pulled into a parking space in the Freddy's parking lot. Do you mind if we eat real quick before hitting the road? He hesitated. No funny business? No funny business, Patton swore. Then, fine. Patton put the car into park, and they started to eat their food. So what's your name? He got a suspicious look in return. My name's Patton, he offered. You can just tell me a nickname. You can call me Anxiety. Patton frowned a bit at the name, but accepted it for the moment. He balled up the burger wrapper and stuck it in the bag. Anxiety, who had just been holding his awkwardly, followed his lead. Now for dessert, Patton enthused, and then made a show of freezing. Wait, I forgot. I'm lactose intolerant. How do you forget? And I forgot my Lactaid pill. Guess you'll have to eat it while I drive. Anxiety glared at him, but took the ice cream. If Patton caught him smiling just a bit as Patton started to drive again, he didn't mention it. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 2. It had always been a quaint little house that his little brother and the boy's father had lived in. It was a little thing with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that faded into the living room dining room, situated in a little neighborhood with a small park and a medium-sized grocery store. At one point in his life, Janus had wondered why his brother preferred to live in such a small space rather than in their mother's much grander house that edged on a mansion, but as he'd grown, he'd come to understand. Mom was a bitch. And even more of one than he'd thought, apparently. Really? The father of your child? The father of your 15-year-old child? He knew there wasn't exactly any love between the 2 of them, but he'd hoped there was at least enough respect not to murder the man. God, Virgil was going to be crushed when he found out. He shook off the thought. There was no time for emotions. First thing first, He needed to get Virgil out of here before Mother deigned to remember his existence. Then he'd deal with the emotional fallout. "Virgil!" he called into the house. There was no answer. Janice frowned. It's fine. He was probably just listening to his music like the angsty teenager he was, right? Except Janice was pretty good at picking up when something was amiss, given his current career, and something seemed amiss, though he couldn't place what. That in mind, he paused to listen. He couldn't hear any sounds in the house, so he started to walk forward a bit. He ducked his head into the kitchen and froze. The window above the dining room table had been broken, leaving glass shattered across the floor. Fuck. Had Mom remembered Virgil's existence? He hadn't thought she'd outright send someone to kill the boy, but what if she had? Janice took a breath and then quickly set about investigating the rest of the house. Other than the broken window, most of the house looked normal until he got to the only room in the house with the lights still on, Virgil's room. The purple and black spiderweb comforter, usually on his bed, had been flung to the floor across the room, and both of his lamps had been knocked over along with some decorations. Also, there was some radio-like device on the floor and a bottle of pepper spray, which, judging by the smell, had recently been used. There was also still drying blood on the carpet, though thankfully not enough to indicate there'd been a murder. Janice swallowed. Okay. Maybe Mom had sent someone after him, but that didn't mean he was dead. He smoothed his face out, even though there was no one there to see it, and took out his cell phone. He found his mother's contact in the phone and pushed the call button. "Yes," she answered on the third ring, her tone already bordering on annoyed. "Good evening, Mother." Janice spoke smoothly, even though he could feel the blood rushing in his ears. "I heard about the tragic—" He made a point to subtly color his tone with sarcasm, something he'd learned from her. "Death of Remington Gates about half an hour ago." He could hear the single eyebrow raise, even from over the phone. "Yes," she replied. "And?" "Well, I was just wondering if I needed to clean out my room at the house, or if there would be another solution for the man's son." "Ah, yes." "Well," she said, "that has been a frustration." "Frustration?" Janice asked. Curious tone. Not scared. Curious, not scared. "I had sent one of my men over to pick him up and bring him to me shortly after Mr. Gates' death. However, he apparently resisted going with a stranger." Janice shivered at the thought of what one of his mother's people would do to a kid who fought him when he was trying to follow her orders, but at least he probably wasn't dead. "So, he's been taken by your man and is on his way to your house now?" "No." "No?" And as much as he tried, just a bit of panic seeped into his tone. He wasn't sure if she'd noticed. "No," she confirmed, with an angry... "Honestly, I know he's my blood, but one would think Kinsley could handle a 15-year-old child." "Wait, then where is he?" "That is the million-dollar question," she scoffed. "The last I knew, Kinsley was whining about washing pepper spray out of his eyes before he could track him down." "So he's on the run?" Janice asked. On the one hand, good for Virgil. On the other hand, where the fuck was his baby brother? "Unfortunately, yes." The way she said unfortunately made it clear that she was far more unhappy about her orders not being fulfilled immediately than worried about the fact that her teenage son was missing. "Perhaps," Janice hedged, keeping his voice level, "you should send someone more competent. I would be willing to step in if you believe it's necessary, not to mention he knows me." "You're volunteering?" she asked. "If it would be of help to you," he said smoothly. "Very well," Mother said. "I'll send you Kinsley's information. You can work with him." "Shit. Must I?" he asked in a bored tone. "It sounds as though he's quite incompetent." He waited with his breath held. "At least meet up with him to get the information he has, but then you can send him back or shoot him for all I care. He's proven himself to be useless." "I will do as you instruct," Janice replied, relieved. "I know you will." And then she hung up. Janice collapsed on Virgil's bed when he was sure the call was actually disconnected, with a groan to wait for the information on Kinsley to come through. While he waited, he pulled out his second phone. He considered it, knee bouncing up and down, and then opened the text app. Virgil is missing. Help? He texted, and sent his location before stuffing it into his pocket again. A few seconds later, details about Kinsley popped up, including his current location using the tracker on his phone. He was in the park down the street. Janice didn't know if he was following Virgil or guessing, but getting him out of the way would be a good starting point either way. He pushed himself to his feet, and after a moment's thought, grabbed the stuffed spider Remy had given Virgil when he was 8 off the boy's bed. He'd probably want that, wherever he ended up. He shoved it into the inner pocket of his coat and then left the quaint little house behind to head to the park down the road. He glanced at his phone and brought up a picture of Kinsley. In theory, he could just text the man and ask where he was, as he'd likely been informed someone else was coming to find him. But it would be much more satisfying to surprise bash his face in. He needn't have bothered looking at the picture, though, as Kinsley was fairly easy to spot, seeing as he was the only grown man crying with his head in a water fountain. Janice couldn't help but let his lips curl in amusement. Serves the bastard right. He walked straight up to him and grabbed him by the back of his hair. He squealed as he was pulled back and tried to fight back blindly. "I'm your replacement," Janice said coolly, and the man froze at his tone. "Where's the kid?" "Fuck, I don't know, man. He ran off. I've been trying to check the park, but my eyes," he whined. "Oh, boo-hoo," Janice growled. "Maybe you shouldn't have let a 15-year-old pepper spray you." "He was prepared somehow, all right? Already knew his daddy was dead and was ready to fight." "How the hell had he—" Didn't matter right now. "Tell me exactly what happened," Janice demanded, yanking on his hair harder. He made a pained sound. "I broke through the window and found the kid in the bedroom. He refused to go with me and said screw his mom because she killed his dad. I smacked him good to get him to cooperate, but that just seemed to piss the little bastard off because the next thing I knew he was pepper spraying me." "And then?" Janice asked calmly. "Then he ran. I don't know where. I've been trying to find him. Assumed he ran to the park. Kids like parks." "I see," Janice said, and then slammed his face into the edge of the water fountain. "You know," he informed the unconscious body, "I was given the option to shoot you." "Before you do that," a voice said casually. There was the unmistakable sound of a gun's safety clicking off. "I'd like to have a word." Janice turned slowly to look in the direction of the voice, and at first thought he recognized the man, but then realized he didn't have a stupid mustache, and also the man he was thinking of probably would have, maybe, had enough sense not to point a gun at Janice when his brother was missing. Great. It seems the other side also sent people looking for his brother. He'd thank Logan, but actually, screw Logan. He eyed the man, pointing a gun at him idly. "Do you even know how to use that thing?" He scoffed. The moment indignation flashed across his face, Janice ducked down and charged at him, twisting his arm behind his back and kicking the gun away when it fell. Yet, as soon as the element of surprise was gone, it became clear that Janice was physically outmatched as they grappled with each other for an edge. He was brought to the ground, but rolled out of the way and kicked him in the stomach. Yet that didn't deter him. Instead, he kept coming at Janice, grabbing his arm and twisting it. Janice clocked him in the face and drew blood. "Fucker!" The man spat, but didn't retreat at all. They continued to wrestle on the ground a bit when they were interrupted by another voice. "Ooh, a fight! I want to join!" Then another body slammed into both of them, knocking the wind out of Janice as Remus threw Roman off of him, only to pin him himself. "Hi, JJ!" "Remus, get off of me!" Janice said, shoving. Remus did not seem inclined to oblige. "Hey, Ro!" "The two of you know each other?" Roman asked, wiping off the blood coming from the side of his mouth. "We're double secret partners," Remus replied with a wink. "Oh." Roman seemed to get what he was implying. "Great. Now will you get the fuck off of me?" "I don't know," Remus said in a sing-song tone. "Remus," Janice said lowly. Remus blinked at the sudden darkness of his tone, and then his eyes widened as he remembered what was happening. He was off of him in seconds. "Right," Remus said. "Jay, this is Roman. Ro, this is Janice. His brother's missing." Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 3. The man Virgil had carjacked, Patton, he had said, hummed a soft tune as he pulled back onto the interstate. Virgil glanced down at the ice cream in his hands and took a second bite. Was he actually serious about all this? Virgil was suspicious, but the guy had been nothing but surprisingly nice for someone who'd been kidnapped. The nicer he was, the worse Virgil felt about the whole breaking into his car and threatening him at knife point thing. Maybe that was the point? Maybe he was hoping Virgil would feel bad enough to eventually just tell him to drive to the police station so he could turn himself in? Not likely. It didn't matter how nice the dude was to him. He was not going anywhere his mother might be able to find him. Nope, not happening. Not after what had happened earlier in the day. He's just lucky he'd been snooping in his dad's room trying to find where the man had hidden the Game Boy, and found whatever radio thing Dad had hidden beneath a floorboard under his bed. Well, lucky was perhaps not the right word, he thought as he stuffed an even larger spoonful of ice cream into his mouth while trying to force himself not to cry. Nothing was lucky about today. He didn't know why his dad had the radio thing. He was pretty sure at this point he didn't know a lot of things. All he knew was that it was some type of communication device, and his mother's voice would have been undeniably clear on it, even if the people hadn't been calling her by name. He hadn't known what on earth was going on. All he knew was that he'd backed away from it in horror and confusion when the message that Remington Gates was dead came through. Mom had said good. He'd hoped it had been some kind of trick, but when some guy had broken into the house to take him to his mother not even 10 minutes later, he'd pieced together the truth. His dad was dead. His mom had killed him, and whatever her plans were for Virgil, Virgil didn't want any part of it. Luckily, when he was 12, he'd watched a horror movie and hadn't slept for a week. His dad had solved the problem by showing him how to use pepper spray effectively and then letting him keep a can of it in his nightstand in case anyone ever broke in to try and kidnap him. Virgil was pretty sure Dad hadn't ever thought someone would break in to try and kidnap him. He'd pepper sprayed the guy Mom had sent and grabbed a knife from the kitchen before booking it out the back door. The options had been the park, the grocery store, or try to make it to the nearest bus stop and hope a bus arrived soon. In a bid to be unpredictable, he'd gone to the grocery store. Of course, he needed to get out of the neighborhood, and fast, but he knew a bus or any form of public transport would be easily trackable. The only solution was a car, but the problems with that were that Virgil didn't have a car, he didn't know how to hotwire a car, and his only experience driving had been when his older brother allowed him to drive a golf cart when he was 7, and he drove it into a pond. Which led him here, in a stranger's car, after waiting for him to come out of the store in the back seat and pressing a kitchen knife up against his neck. It had been a day. He finished the entire giant concrete ice cream thing Patton had got him and stuck it in the bag with the rest of the trash. "Want to listen to the radio?" Patton asked. "Passenger gets to choose the station." Sure. Virgil reached forward to flip it on. They were far enough out of range to whatever station Patton had last listened to in town was now just static, so Virgil started to mess with the dials. There didn't seem to be any music stations that adhered to his tastes, so he just ended up on some pop station. He was just settling back into his seat when Patton's phone started to ring from where he'd tossed it when he'd gotten in the car at the grocery store. Virgil blinked at the phone. "Is that the Mission Impossible theme song?" he asked. "Yes." "Why does it sound like that?" "It's the kazoo version," Patton explained. "Why?" Patton just smiled. "I should probably answer it." "No," Virgil said. "You're not allowed to answer it." Patton shrugged. The music stopped after a few more seconds and then started up right after that. "It's my brother. He's going to keep calling," Patton informed him. "And if I don't answer, he's going to call the cops because he assumed I was kidnapped. Which, in this case..." "Shit," Virgil said as the ringing stopped again, only to pick up once more a moment later. "Shit, fine. You can answer it, but I'm putting it on speaker, and don't try to tell him anything." "Yeah, all right," Patton agreed easily. Oh God, this was a bad idea. Virgil grabbed the phone and accepted the call before putting it on speaker. "Hi-lo." "Why aren't you answering your home phone?" "I'm not at home," Patton said. "Where are you?" Patton considered it for a moment. "I'm on a road trip." "A road trip," the man on the other side of the line asked blankly. What do you mean? I mean, I got in my car and now I'm driving. You were supposed to be home all week, Patton. I need you to be in the city right now. Where are you? Virgil shook his head wildly. I don't know, Patton said thoughtfully. A road. Patton. The man groaned. Why? It's just a thing that happened, Lo. Sorry if you needed me. How is a road trip a thing that just happens, Patton? He asked. Patton glanced at Virgil. It just did? He said. Patton! Anyway, I'm a little bit busy, so talk to you later. Patton, do not hang up the phone. Love you, Logie! He jerked his head at Virgil, and Virgil hit the end call button. The second the call ended, Virgil groaned. It would have been better if you just didn't answer. The Mission Impossible song kazoo version started playing again. It'll be best if you just turn that off, Patton said. Won't he just call the cops? Patton gave him a secret smile. No, he'll just think I'm being silly and ignoring him. Do you do stuff like that often? Virgil asked. Just enough so he doesn't ask questions when I don't want him to, Patton divulged. It's a little brother thing, you know. Virgil flinched just a bit. A brother thing. He wondered where his brother was now. He'd always been nice to Virgil, but he'd also always been obedient to Mom. He wondered if he knew about Virgil's dad. The two had always gotten along, even though he wasn't Janice's father, but Mom was... Mom. Virgil didn't want to know whose side he'd take. The ringtone ended and started to back up once again. Virgil held down the power button until it turned off and decided to store it in the glove compartment so Patton couldn't reach it as easily. Though perhaps he should have thought of that earlier, but he was new to the whole kidnapping thing. He sat back against the seat and started rubbing at the sleeves of his hoodie. Everything okay over there? Patton asked. I'm fine, Virgil snapped, and then bristled under the raised eyebrow he got in return. This radio station is just stupid, he grumbled. Well, you can change it, Patton pointed out. The radio station wasn't actually the problem, but it did give him something to do with his hands. He reached forward and started fiddling with the radio dials. About 10 minutes later, he hit a radio station that wasn't music, but just some guy talking. Virgil paused on the station and sat back. Whoever the guy was, his voice was low and soothing. Virgil closed his eyes and listened for a few minutes before he let out a startled chuckle. He's talking about Mothman? He opened his eyes to see Patton's face crinkled up in a soft smile. He is. Virgil couldn't help but start to giggle. He laughed so hard it started to blur into sobbing. He felt a gentle touch on his knee and looked over at Patton. There are tissues in the glove box, he told Virgil. Virgil nodded and reached forward into the glove box to grab the Kleenex box while still sniffling. He blotted at his eyes and blew his nose before sticking the dirty tissue into his hoodie pocket. Today had been a horrible day. He was exhausted. He leaned back against the seat and his eyes flickered closed. Do you want me to change the radio station? Patton asked softly. Virgil laughed again and barely restrained himself from going into another fit. No, he said. It's fine. I've got to hear how it ends. That's fair, Patton said, and though Virgil had his eyes closed, he imagined he was shooting him one of those confusing soft smiles again. The conspiracy theory radio guy kept blathering on about sightings of Mothman in a deceptively calm tone. Wow, Virgil was tired. Falling asleep while the guy you carjacked drove probably wasn't a good idea. That was one of the last coherent thoughts he had before he drifted off to sleep. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 4. Janice shoved himself to his feet, and while Remus would usually find it easy to laugh at him for the way his hair looked, the cold glare the other man was sending him was nothing like the glares he usually leveled at Remus. He did not want to mess with that glare. Remus had some self-preservation instincts. Your brother? Roman asked, still on his butt and looking confused. Now Remus could laugh at right now. Remus cackled. You might want to find a new hair and makeup artist, Roro. Roman glared at him, which just served to make Remus cackle more. I apologize for him, Janice muttered. Roman blinked up at him, and a smile flickered over his face. That's a new one. I'm usually the one apologizing for him. Janice paused for a moment before he cracked a smile himself. I guess you would be. He stuck out a hand to help Roman to his feet. So, Roman said, you're here for Virgil Gates then too? Janice nodded. Yes. I didn't know he had any other family other than his father and his uncle. Why didn't... He stumbled over not calling Dad. Sanders call you then? Janice's mouth pinched in displeasure. It likely has to do with the fact that my mother killed his father, Janice said blankly. Remus grimaced. Blank Janice was far scarier than glaring Janice. It meant he was feeling a whole bunch of things and didn't want anyone to know it. Oh, that's... Roman said awkwardly. That's heavy, dude. Yes. Heavy. Well, we'll snatch the kid up and make sure Mommy Dearest doesn't get her hands on Baby Bob, Remus said. Won't we, Ro? Remus gave Roman a look and he nodded once sharply. Of course we will, Roman said. That's why I'm here anyway. I'm going with you, Janice informed them. Roman opened his mouth like he was thinking about arguing, but since Remus enjoyed having a brother, he cut him off. Yep, of course you are, Jay. Between the three of us, we'll find him in no time. I mean, how far could the pipsqueak have gotten? Janice nodded sharply. He turned to Roman. You were looking for him, too. What do you know? Not much more than you, Roman answered. There'd clearly been a break-in when I checked the house, and I found what I'm guessing was his... He pointed a thumb at the unconscious man by the water fountain. Car down the road, which a neighbor said they'd seen someone come out of and go sneaking around the house. So I figured Virgil and whoever broke into the house were probably still around, Roman said. I swung by the bus stop down the street, but no buses have left in the last half hour or so, and I couldn't see anyone around. Then I thought to check the park and came here and heard you, talking to that guy. Roman gestured to the unconscious body a couple feet away, about finding him. He didn't know much else, Janice told them. Virgil pepper-sprayed him and bolted. Remus snorted. Good on him. A very small smile flickered across Janice's face, but was gone the next second. Well, that's the park and the bus station checked, Janice said. Would he go to any neighbors? Roman asked. Janice shook his head. Probably not. He doesn't know many of them well. Mrs. Owens, maybe, or maybe she would have seen something. She lives next to them. We'll start there, then, Roman said. What about this guy? Remus asked while poking him with the toe of his foot. He's still breathing. Call the cops, Janice suggested. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a plastic bag to toss to Remus, who caught it. Don't leave fingerprints. Why do you have a bagged-up gun in your pocket? Roman asked. I was doing something before this, Janice answered. See, that doesn't answer my question. Remus ignored them in favor of rolling the body carefully over and shoving the gun into the guy's pocket so it was visible, but didn't look like it was supposed to be visible. He then handcuffed the guy to the water fountain and, just for funsies, put a joint on him. All done, he said after he'd positioned the man perfectly. Roman was still side-eyeing Janice a bit, but was on the phone talking to the police, saying something about finding an unconscious guy with a gun. And we handcuffed him, Remus whisper-yelled. Roman glanced at the unconscious guy. We handcuffed him to a water fountain because he seemed dangerous and we didn't want him to get away. As Roman continued to talk to the operator, Remus sidled up to Janice and elbowed him in the side. Janice shoved him away grumpily, but not enough to send Remus stumbling. Remus took that as a sign he was willing to talk. The little bastard's fine, Remus promised. We'll find him in no time. He's my little brother, Janice said, and his tone was level and informative, but Remus could tell he was a screaming mess on the inside. Remus nudged his shoulder a bit, and Janice scowled at the ground and stepped away. Remus narrowed his eyes at him. Roman must have looked over and read the intention in the wiggle of Remus's shoulders, because he said, Remus, no! That, however, did not stop Remus from launching his whole body at Janice and tackling him to the ground. Remus, get off! Janice yelled, trying to smack him, but Remus just dodged and tucked his face against his chest. He was whacked on the back of the head, but not nearly as hard as he could have been. Forced affection! Roman, come get your damn brother off of me! Janice groused while shoving at Remus's head. Remus... Roman groaned, and Remus felt a hand pulling at the back of his shirt. Remus just clung tighter. Let him go. He nuzzled his cheek against Janice's shoulder. But I love him. You're a menace to society, Janice retorted, which was basically saying it back as far as Remus was concerned, especially with the way fondness seemed to leak into his tone. He shoved at Remus's forehead again, and Remus relented, hopping to his feet. Janice sighed heavily and pushed himself into a sitting position. Right as Janice made it to his feet, his phone dinged. It was his phone from Dad, not the one from Janice's mom, Remus noted as he took it out of his pocket. Remus leaned over his shoulder to get a look at what the text said. Janice spared him a glance, but didn't protest him looking. Mission details were attached, and a rather formal message read, "Be at Bucking Bay in 30 minutes for a pickup. Please confirm." Remus could tell, and he knew by the look on Janice's face that he could tell too, that Dad did not think Janice knew that his brother was missing. He silently opened the attachment and read the mission details before dropping the phone onto the ground and stomping his foot on the screen until it shattered. "No offense," he said calmly, "but fuck your father." He turned away toward the entrance of the park without another word. Remus swallowed thickly and shared a glance with Roman. "We should probably follow him," Roman said. "He knows where the neighbor lives." Remus nodded, though he'd planned on following Janice even if he didn't have information about the mission they were on. They followed him down the street back towards where Remus knew Virgil and Remy's house was. Had been? He didn't think Virgil would be living there anymore if his dad was dead. Janice knocked on the front door of a house next door without preamble. It took a few seconds for the door to open. Even after working with Janice for the last 2 years, Remus was still surprised at how quickly the other man's face could transform. "Good evening, Mrs. Owens," he said smoothly, an apologetic smile on his face and a slight crinkle to his brow. "I was supposed to pick up Virgil to take him to a school play tonight, but he wasn't home when I knocked. Would you happen to have seen anything? I believe he may have left his phone at home." The woman who'd opened the door blinked at him in confusion for a few moments before a smile lit up her face. "Oh, hello, Janice," she said. "I did see him run out his back door a few minutes ago and hop the fence." "He went out the back door?" Janice said, a small frown flickering over his face for a moment before it disappeared. "Towards the grocery store, perhaps?" "He did seem to be going that way," she confirmed. "Well, I did tell him I would help him sneak in snacks to the play," Janice said. "Perhaps he forgot and ran to get some. When did you see him?" "Oh, about a half an hour ago, give or take. I'm surprised he's not back yet." Janice chuckled lightly. "Probably got tied up in the chocolate aisle. I'll look for him there. Thank you, ma'am." "Oh, it's not a problem, sweetie. Have fun at the play." Janice continued to smile until the door snapped shut. Then his face fell back into a neutral expression and he turned away. "The grocery store," he said. "Let's look there. He does know the area, so it would be a good place to hide." "Yeah, dude," Remus replied. "I'm sure he's off hiding in the chocolate aisle, just like you said." Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 5. Emil hummed a quick tune as he pulled into the grocery store parking lot near his apartment. He'd just finished his last session of the day with Kai, and Remy had asked that he watch Virgil this evening after work, and possibly this weekend, so Emil was picking up something to cook for dinner before he headed over there. He was going to grab ingredients to make Virgil's favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs. Well, his actual favorite dinner was pineapple pizza from the local pizza joint, but Emil wanted to serve the boys something at least somewhat healthy for once in his life. That in mind, he went straight to the pasta aisle. While contemplating which of the spaghetti noodles he should grab, he noticed a man with a cart also perusing the aisle. He glanced at the contents of the man's cart. "That's a lot of cheese there, friendo," he commented. "I'm trying to make homemade macaroni and cheese," the man divulged with a smile. "That's always fun," Emil replied, smiling back himself. "I've never done it before. Do you have any suggestions for noodles?" How about the shell ones?" "Ooh, like the box Velveeta shell macaroni, but better," he enthused. "Aw, they have mini ones." He snatched the box excitedly. "They're so cute." "They are," Emil agreed, as he finally selected the whole wheat store-brand spaghetti and slid it into his cart. "Thanks for the suggestion. Have a nice day," the man said and turned to leave. "Bye," Emil called after him. He then continued on his quest, grabbing pasta sauce and a lot of fresh vegetables to sneak into the canned sauce, as well as to leave in his brother's home with the hopes that either his brother or his nephew might actually eat something healthy for once if it was right there. Doubtful, but Emil could hope. He then spent an inordinate amount of time debating which popcorn to get. Emil was thinking tonight would be a good night for movies with Virgil, and Virgil's favorite snack was popcorn. He really should get the less buttery one, but he knew that Virgil liked buttery popcorn more. Perhaps he should compromise and get plain popcorn, but that one healthier ranch-flavored powdered topping that he liked. Decided, he grabbed the popcorn and the topping and went to exit the snack food aisle. "Hey!" A man with a mustache drew his attention away from his task. "My friend lost his little brother in the store. Have you seen a younger teenager walking around alone here? We think he might have gone to the snack food aisle." Emil frowned. "No, I haven't seen anyone. I hope you find him soon." "Thanks," the man said, already distracted with looking around again. "Maybe try the front desk," Emil suggested. "They could call over the intercom." "My brother's already there," the man said, waving the suggestion off. "But thanks." "Well, good luck," Emil said as the man walked away toward the back of the store. Gee, it took him almost 40 minutes to get groceries, he realized when he glanced at his phone in the checkout aisle. He shouldn't have let himself get that distracted. Once he'd paid for the groceries, he took everything to his car and shoved them in the back seat. Right as he was about to stick his key in the ignition, he got a text message from his secretary. "Kai forgot his phone in your couch again, but your office is locked. Are you able to swing by really quick to let him in?" He texted back, "Sure, I'll be there in 5. He wasn't going to keep Kai away from his phone for the night, and it wasn't like the groceries he grabbed were extremely time-sensitive, so he drove back to the office. Kai seemed thankful for his willingness to drive all the way back, even if his thank you was rather distracted, as he was already typing something on his phone the moment after Emil handed it back to him. He said goodbye to Kai and to his secretary and hopped back into his car, intending to drive to Remy's house. He'd just started the car when his phone started to ring. "Yellow," he said cheerfully. "Emil." The serious voice greeted on the other end of the line. "This is Logan Sanders." Emil sobered immediately. "Hi, Logan. Is something wrong? Do you have a patient for me?" "No, actually," Logan said. "It's about your brother." Emil froze. "What about my brother?" he asked. "Remy is on light duty." "He was, yes," Logan said. "However, there was a complication." "What type of complication?" Emil said, and a bit of anger came to his tone unbidden. "He was specifically targeted," Logan said, and despite the calm way he spoke, Emil could detect the distress in his tone. "I'm very sorry, but he's dead." "Oh, God. What about Virgil?" "That's the other thing," Logan continued. "As soon as I heard of Mr. Gates' death, I dispatched an agent to his house for protection, but when he arrived, his son was not there. There were signs of a break-in, but the perpetrator's car was still there, and my agent believes Virgil fled the scene and was followed on foot. My agent is currently searching for him." "There's a but," Emil concluded. There was a slight pause, just enough to tell Emil he wasn't nearly as unaffected as he was pretending to be. "I haven't heard from that specific agent in over half an hour." "Okay," Emil gulped, suddenly feeling sick to his stomach. There were hundreds of explanations for that, but many of them were bad. "Okay, I'll go look for him myself, since I know him and where he might go. I'll," his voice cracked a bit, "call you if I find anything." "All right, and I'll—" But whatever Logan was going to say was lost as a hand touched Emil's shoulder. Emil screamed and tossed his phone as he accidentally slammed his elbow into the car horn, making it blare. "Calm down, it's just me," said a voice. "Frickin' frozen shiitake mushrooms, terrible tiger fish paste, and cabbages, Remington!" "You could curse like a normal person, Emil." "And you could not break into my car like a normal person," Emil shot back, turning around in his seat to face his older brother. "I'll presume you're not dead, then." "Aw, were you worried about me?" he asked. Violence is never the answer. At least that's what he told his patients. Emil punched his shoulder the best he could from this angle. It clearly didn't hit too hard as Remy just laughed. "Sorry, Em," he said, reaching forward to ruffle his hair. Emil slapped him away. "What happened?" he asked. "Megabitch X decided she wanted me shot in the head, and I decided I didn't want that." "What does that mean?" Emil asked. "It means," Remy answered, "I faked my own death, and while she thought I was dead." He dug something out of his pocket and dangled it in front of him. It was a flash drive. I stole this. What is it? Super secret spy business. Remy. All that matters is that she really shouldn't have it, and Logan will be very happy I got it away from her. Speaking of Logan, Emil had dropped his phone when Remy had surprised him, and the call had ended. He picked up the phone. I should call him back. The phone was slapped out of his hand the second he picked it up. What the criff, Remy? Please, just say fuck, I beg of you, Remy groaned. The phone started ringing again from its place on the floor. Doubtlessly it was Logan, since the last thing he'd heard was Emil screaming like he was being murdered. I need to answer that, Remy, Emil said with a frown. You can't. It's too risky. You literally just said you stole it for Logan. Why can't I just answer the phone, say Remy's fine actually, and he has a super secret spy flash drive to give to you? Because you don't say shit like that over the telephone, Remy told him while starting to wiggle his way into the front seat. We're going to take this thing to Logan in person, and no one can know I'm alive until then. I know you're alive, Emil pointed out. Remy grabbed Emil's phone when it stopped ringing and hit the power button to turn it off. He stuck it into his pocket. Family doesn't count, Remy said. Also, I needed a ride. Are you really going to keep my phone hostage this whole time? And also, what happened to your car? It, blew up, Remy said. Emil stared at him blankly. Yeah. So anyway. What do you mean it blew up? Emil asked. I said anyway. Saying anyway doesn't just mean that I magically forget whatever you just said. Remy waved that off. Anyway, he said again, we'll have to pick up Virgil and do something with him. I'm not leaving him alone during this. Right. I assume since you're not dead that Virgil isn't actually missing, Emil concluded. But instead of agreeing and telling Emil where Virgil was to go pick him up, there was silence. Virgil is what? Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Roman and Remus piled into Janice's car to head to the grocery store. It was pulled into Remy Gates' driveway and only a few feet away, whereas Roman had parked on the street, and Remus had likely parked somewhere nearer to the park. Not that Roman cared to get into that death trap. His father and Remus had built it together when Roman and Remus had been 14, and Roman loved them both dearly, and Dad was smart, but he wasn't an engineer or mechanic, and Remus was a beacon of chaos. It did not matter that the car had managed to hold up for almost 10 years, whereas Roman was on his third car. He would still never trust the damn thing. Ever. Janice's car was the exact opposite of Remus's. Roman wasn't very good with cars, but even he could tell that it was an expensive one, that was likely not constructed by a teenager and his dad in a garage, with no dents or rust, and it still had that new car smell when he got inside. Roman could probably buy his apartment complex for how much money this thing was worth. Yet, despite that, Remus seemed familiar with the car. He hopped straight into the passenger seat and started pushing buttons, the functions of which Roman did not know. One thing he did understand was the dials for the radio, and that when Remus tapped the saved radio station under the third slot, it switched to Remus's favorite channel. Remus then leaned back against the seat and put his feet up on the dash. "Why do you have to be like this?" Janice asked, sounding exhausted the moment he entered the driver's side door, and the very intense bagpipe music met his ears. He reached into the car to slap Remus's calves. Remus didn't move them, but just smiled. "It's P-Rock Day," he said happily. Janice shook his head and moved to sit down. He yelped immediately and shot forward on the seat. "You turned on the seat massagers?" "Of course I turned on the seat massagers, Jay." I don't want those things on." He started pushing buttons himself. The hazard lights came on, as well as the windshield wipers, and some beeping started up. Remus! How do you turn these things off?" He slammed a hand against the dashboard, and the lights in the back suddenly were blinding Roman. "Stupid piece of scrap metal!" Remus batted his hands away and put the car to rights again rather quickly. Janice mumbled a couple more curses under his breath, but didn't do anything more as he put the car into reverse and started driving down the street. "Okay," he said once they were moving, his creepily calm attitude back in place again. So this was Remus's partner? Roman, of course, knew a bit more about what Remus did than most of the other people in the agency, considering Remus was his brother. Not to mention they were both the sons of Logan Sanders, so if they wanted to talk about anything when they got together to have dinner every other Saturday, it was probably going to end up being about the covert spy operations everyone went on. Dad pretended not to be a gossip, but at the end of the day... So, Roman knew that Remus was a triple agent. He pretended to spy on Dad for Barbara Nelson when he was actually spying on Nelson for Dad. Roman also knew a bit about his partner. Remus had even let slip the nickname Jay a couple of times and talked affectionately about him. Janice was a double agent, turning on Nelson to work for Dad. However, Roman had not been aware that Janice was Nelson's son, a fact which he'd surmised since Janice said that his mother killed Remy. Which was... Obviously, Dad had to know that information, and trusted him enough to take his word as a double agent, but it still gave Roman a bit of pause. Not to mention, he was clearly a cold and efficient liar, which served to put Roman even more on edge. The only thing keeping Roman from insisting they leave him was the way he acted around Remus. Remus had provided the only cracks in his carefully constructed, calm but vicious front. Every time Remus did or said something Remusy, Janice would give him one of those fondly exasperated looks that only Remus could provoke, and they seemed to be more than just partners, but friends. So, Roman was going to trust him for a moment, attributing the roughness to his missing brother. "What's the plan?" Janice asked when they pulled into the grocery store's parking lot. "I have an FBI agent ID," Roman said. "I can go push for information at the front desk." Janice nodded, and his fingers tapped twice against the steering wheel before he stopped the nervous tick. "He might also hide outside the store. There is a small creek behind the store he used to go get muddy in. He will be... well, maybe he will be less likely to run from me, and I know the area, so I'll check there. Remus can check inside the store while you ask around." "Okay, that works," Roman agreed. "Meet back at the car afterwards?" Janice nodded as he pulled into a parking spot. Remus slapped Janice on the shoulder before exiting the car and got a scowl at his back in return. Roman shook his head and followed them out of the car. Janice separated from them a few feet before the door to the grocery store, and Remus and Roman entered the store together. "I'ma check out the store," Remus said. "Okay, don't do anything stupid," Roman said as he walked away. He got a flippant wave in return. "Remus, don't do anything stupid, please." And he was gone. Roman shook his head and turned, searching for the front desk. He reached for his wallet and smiled at the employee in the front desk. "Hello, ma'am," he said. "I'm looking for someone, and I was hoping you'd help me." He pulled out his only sort of fake FBI ID to show her. "I'm looking for a teenager who has gone missing and is connected to a case, and we have reports that he may have come in here. Perhaps you've seen him?" Roman said. He took out his phone to show her the picture of Virgil that he'd been sent, only to find that his screen had been cracked and it wouldn't turn on, likely damaged in the fight with Janice. Great. He looked back up to the woman. "I apparently don't have a picture to show you at the moment, but you've possibly seen him before, as he lives in the neighborhood. Virgil Gates?" He got a blank stare in return. Fantastic. He spent another 15 or so minutes trying to explain to the woman who he was looking for, a difficult task, as all he had to go off of was the memory of one picture that he'd been sent an hour ago, and getting shrugs and apologies in response. Eventually, he left, and looked around the store for a bit himself. His brother was suspiciously absent from everywhere Roman looked. Eventually, he wandered back to the front by himself, only to see Remus coming from the checkout with a bag full of snack foods. Roman crossed his arms. "You were supposed to be looking for a missing minor, not shopping." "Chill," Remus said, making Roman want to do the opposite of chill. "I looked for the kid and shopped at the same time. I even got Cheetos." He smiled widely as they left the store. "Also, I broke into their security office." "You what?" Roman asked. "I broke into their security office," Remus repeated happily. "And why?" Janice asked tiredly while walking up to them. "Did you do that?" "To get the security camera footage, duh," he said, pointing at a camera near the top of the door. "I figured he might not have gone inside, but the neighbor said he headed in this direction, so that thing probably saw him." "That's actually pretty smart," Roman said. though we probably could have just asked. Remus shrugged. Luckily, they apparently saved security footage to a cloud, and I was able to download it pretty easily. We should be able to see everything that happened inside and outside the grocery store in the last 2 hours, assuming you've got something to watch it on. Janice nodded and led them back to his car where he took a laptop out of his trunk. Remus downloaded the footage and then handed it over to Janice. You'll be able to spot him best, since you know what he looks like better than us. It took almost 20 minutes of Janice watching the surveillance photo for him to find what he was looking for. Got him, he said. Roman leaned over to get a good look at the screen. The video feed was a bit blurry, but he could see a lanky teenager with dark hair running to the grocery store parking lot. He took a break when he got there and looked behind him, probably to make sure he hadn't been followed. Then he found a bush to hide behind. They watched for a few minutes until he finally hopped back up and started walking toward a car. What's he doing? Roman asked as the boy on the camera glanced around himself to make sure nobody was watching before starting to fiddle with something. Oh, God, Janice groaned. Why did I teach him to pick a car lock? Emil was right. They watched as he managed to pop the door open to the stranger's car and slipped inside. Not even 5 minutes later, a man with grocery bags got into the front seat, though it was too blurry to see who he was or the license plate on the car. The car drove out of the parking lot after a few more minutes. God damn it, Virgil, Janice hissed, and Roman barely saved the laptop from crashing to the ground. Now he's just in the back of some random person's car. He started pacing back and forth, steam practically pouring from his ears. Roman was almost scared for Virgil when Janice managed to find him because he looked ready to commit a murder. That was over an hour ago. Who knows where he could be right now? What could have happened to him by now? And Roman realized, he wasn't angry. Not really. He was terrified. What the hell am I supposed to do? He kicked the car fender, leaving a dent, and then kicked it again. Then a phone rang in his pocket and he froze, all emotion draining off of his face startlingly quickly. Roman was confused because he was pretty sure he'd seen Janice step on his phone earlier, but the one he pulled out now was a different type. He glanced at the caller ID and said, It's my mother. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 7. Logan was a calm man. One would have to be with his chosen career path. Much of it was waiting quietly for the perfect moment, or doing rapid calculations in one's head while in the midst of danger and chaos. He had not made it this far in his career by being prone to emotional outbursts or irrational behavior. Logan was a calm, rational person, which is what he told himself even as he threw his phone across the room and it smacked the opposite wall. "God damn it, Patton!" he yelled as the other employees in the control room all paused to glance at him before quickly looking away. He took a deep breath and walked across the room to his phone. It was, of course, unharmed, seeing as Roman had specifically worked with a manufacturer to produce him an indestructible phone for his last birthday, and on top of that had given him a life-proof case for it. Roman, his son, who he had not heard from for over an hour at this point. He clenched his fist around the phone. He could not get emotional about this. That would not be productive at this point. He needed to think. He needed to plan. He needed someone to answer their phone. Hearing of Remington's death was already distressing enough on a personal level, as he'd known the man for years. As a father himself, he had understood why Remington wanted to be on desk duty since his son was born, and he had respected that. Emil at the time hadn't even been a legal adult, and there was the real risk that if something happened to Remy, that his son would end up in the hands of the boy's mother, who at the time had simply been considered a raging bitch, according to Remy, but had later proved herself that and more. So, Logan had never even thought about having him back in the field until Virgil was at least 18. Yet, it had still happened. He was still dead, targeted by Virgil's own mother. As he imagined Remington would want, Logan's first thought had been for the man's son, and he'd immediately dispatched Roman as he'd been the closest agent to the house at the time. That is when things started to go even more wrong than just a missing agent. The last Logan had heard from his own son, he'd been tracking down Virgil Gates and whoever Roman had assumed attempted to kidnap him. He'd found the kidnapper's car still down the street and texted Logan that he'd checked the nearby bus station and would check the park next. Thinking he had that sorted with Roman on finding the teenager, his mind had wandered to Janice, the boy's brother. Logan had worried that Janice would have an intense emotional response to the situation and had sent the agent a fake mission in hopes of distracting him until the issue with Virgil was sorted. The text had been marked as read only a few moments later, but there had been no response. That was concerning, to say the least. It was possible he had heard of Remington's death himself and was distracted, but there would be no reason for him to ignore Logan's text, as he shouldn't be aware Logan himself knew of Remington's death. In fact, it would be more in character for him to text Logan back and inform him of the issue in that case. After waiting a few more minutes, he tried texting Roman again and got no response, and then he tried again and again. Soon it had been 20 minutes since he last heard from Roman, and he had attempted to call him. He hadn't got an answer. After a few more phone calls, he'd tried to call Remus to ask him if he'd heard from his brother, but he hadn't answered either. He continued to rotate between calling and texting the two of them, and sometimes Janice, hoping one of them would pick up, but none of them did. With no word from either of his sons or his double agent about their whereabouts or the missing child's, he'd decided to call the boy's uncle. When that phone call ended with a car honking and a scream, and none of his attempts to call back got any response, Logan really started to panic. Or worry. Not panic. Concerned, even. Logan started to get a healthy amount of concerned. There were only thousands of reasons he could think up for the radio silence from everyone with a connection to his agency in a certain geographical region, especially directly after the confirmed death of one of his inactive agents who lived in the area. Surely one of those thousands wasn't that every one of them was dead, including his own sons. Thinking about his family, it occurred to him that considering Patton was an agent, though on vacation at the moment, and also lived in the area, he needed to call his brother as well. The relief from his brother actually answering his phone was quickly burned away by the agitation, as he was not where he was supposed to be. Though a voice in the back of Logan's head did wonder if perhaps that's why he's still able to answer his phone, and instead was on an impromptu road trip. After providing no other information to Logan, Patton had hung up on him. He'd been sent to voicemail halfway through the second time he'd tried to call back. The bastard had turned off his phone. So the question was what to do now. He collapsed back into his seat and glanced at his phone, hoping he'd received some form of communication from anyone in the last minute, but alas, there was still nothing. He was regretting making his agent's cell phones untraceable. He wondered if he could hack into Nelson's network without her realizing. He knew she kept trackers on her agents. Janice, at least, would have his phone from her, and Remus might. Assuming, of course, she hadn't ordered a hit on them and taken back the cell phones herself. He wouldn't put it past her. It was worth a try, at least, he decided, booting up his computer. He had a better chance now, since Janice had let him look at his phone a few times. However, neither of them had wanted to risk trying any hacking on it. Nelson had no qualms about taking her own family out, after all. Logan had been suspicious that she'd killed Logan's mentor years ago, but he hadn't any proof. Janice had confirmed this as fact almost 2 decades later, when he'd told Logan that she talked about the fact that she killed her own father to him. Remembering that fact made him more nervous for Janice, and Remus by extension. They had already been very careful, but the risk was still there. Not to mention, if Janice was in emotional distress over the death of Remington, then he might be less careful. He distracted himself from those churning thoughts by turning his attention back to the computer. He wasn't surprised that there were no weaknesses in her security that he could find. After all, they'd had the same teacher, and she'd doubtlessly learned more from him over the course of her life since she'd been his daughter. He took a break to look at his phone again after 10 minutes. There were still no messages from anyone. He tried to call everyone's phones again in quick succession, but no one picked up. He just pressed end after the voicemail picked up for Roman again when a voice interrupted him. "Sir?" Darlene said tentatively. "Yes," he ground out, still looking at his phone. He was trying not to snap at any of his employees, but it was getting difficult. "We pinged an outgoing call from Virgil Gates' cell phone," she said. "What?" Logan asked, looking up at her. Both he and Roman had tried to call the boy's cell phone, but it had gone directly to voicemail, and they'd assumed he'd either ditch the phone or turn it off. "Show me." He got to his feet, and she led him to another computer. On her computer, a map was pulled up, and a little red dot lit up the place the call had come from. "Where is he?" Logan asked. "Around Livensburg," she answered. "That's almost 80 miles from the city," Logan said. At least he was moving closer to Logan's location instead of further away. "Well, he seems to be on the interstate," she pointed out. "Pretty easy to do." "Yes, the question is how a 15-year-old is getting down the interstate," Logan said. "Check bus routes and calls to taxis," he said to the room at large before turning back to Darlene. "Who did he call?" "He was trying to call Emil Picani. And didn't get through, I'd imagine." "No," she confirmed. Poor kid, Logan thought. "Well, at least we have a starting point. I'll send another team out to the location, though extreme caution will be advised." "I'll go," Frederick volunteered before he could even ask. "Thank you," Logan said. "I can go too," Darlene suggested. Logan nodded. "Because of the phone communication issues at the moment, I'm giving you a long-distance listening device, and I expect you to have it on and on one of your persons at all times." They both nodded, and Frederick turned to go get the proper supplies while Darlene looked back at her computer. "Another phone call just went out from Virgil's phone," Darlene said. "It's to the phone you provided Janice Nelson. There's no answer there, either." Well, that answered whether or not Janice was ignoring him in favor of worrying for his brother. Clearly something was going on, and Logan was afraid of what. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 8. "What the fuck do you mean Virgil is missing?" Remy asked. "That's the second thing Logan said to me," Emil said. "When he heard you died, he sent an agent over to check on Virgil, but there'd been signs of a break-in and Virgil was gone. They don't think he actually got kidnapped, though, because of the car of whoever broke in there was still there." "Well, then where the hell is my kid?" Remy yelled. Emil flinched at his suddenly loud tone. "Leaping lizards, Remy, I don't know. I thought you did since you're not actually dead." "Well, I don't!" "Yeah, I'm getting that. Calm down for a second." "Okay, right now is not a good time to tell me to calm down," Remy said. "My kid is missing." "I know, Remy," Emil said in his professionally soothing voice. "But we have to think in order to do something about that." Oh, he was thinking. He was thinking really hard right about now. He was thinking about how the person who had sent someone to kidnap his son was the woman who just tried to have him fucking executed. God, Remy hadn't even wanted her around his fucking kid when she'd just been a bitch and not an enemy agent out for his blood. "We should call Logan back," Emil suggested. "He might have more information." "No," Remy said. "It's still too risky." "Remy." "I said no, Emil," Remy snapped. "What if she has him and intercepts the phone call? She doesn't have any reason to hurt him right now, other than the fact that he had quite the mouth on him and would probably piss her off by being a little shit, especially if she wouldn't tell him where Remy was. But if she knows I'm alive, she might." "Would she really?" "The woman just tried to shoot me with poison bullets. I wouldn't put it past her." "Poison bullets? It's not important," Emil said. "If we're not going to get information from Logan, then how are we supposed to even start with finding Virgil?" "Easy," Remy said. "The tracker I put on him." "I'm sorry, you put what on Virgil?" Emil asked. "A tracker," Emil said. "It's in that bracelet he always wears. I don't really want to go back to the house, but I think I left one of the devices to find him in here in case of emergencies." He started digging through Emil's glove box. "Jiminy crickets, you can't just put a tracker on your teenage son, Remy." "Why not?" Remy asked, still digging through the papers. Did Emil ever get rid of old insurance cards? And also, how many drive-through napkins did he need to keep? "It's an invasion of privacy," Emil sputtered. Remy waved him off. "Oh, please, I'm a secret agent. A usually off-duty one, but still a secret agent. Sometimes I need to know where my kid's at, like now. Besides, I told him what it was when I gave it to him, and it lights up when activated. He can just chuck it out a window if he doesn't want me knowing where he is." "Oh, well, that's okay then," Emil said. Remy hummed as his hand closed around the phone-sized device hidden at the back of the glove box. "Ah, here it is." "When exactly did you put that in here?" "Like 2 years ago," Remy said. "Clean your car every once in a while." "Remington, I have seen your garage." Maybe, but I never claimed to be responsible. The thing was out of charge, so he plugged it into the car, and it booted up pretty quickly. Emil leaned over to look at the map that popped up. Remy pushed a couple of buttons to activate the tracker. A red dot appeared on the map, and Remy blinked at it. "What the fuck?" he asked. He pushed another button, and the device beeped, finding Remy's current location on the map and putting a green dot there. The map had to zoom out quite a bit to fit both dots on the screen. A number appeared at the top of the map. "Shit. Please tell me that's feet," Emil groaned. "How the hell did he manage to get 50 miles away? I've been dead for less than an hour and a half." "Did one of Barbara's people get to him?" He's moving in the wrong direction if that's the case," Remy said. "Her house is in town, and the secret base I know of is north of here. He's going southeast on the interstate." He squinted at the map. "Well, then where is he going? And how is he going to get there?" Emil asked. "I'm not sure, but you need to start driving." Emil hesitated for a moment. "Now." He nodded and put the car in reverse before pulling out of the parking lot and turning onto the interstate. "Hey, Emil," Remy said pleasantly after about 2 minutes. "Remember how Mother said not to speed unless it was absolutely necessary?" Emil glanced at him out of the corner of his eye. "It's absolutely necessary today." Emil gave him a slightly disapproving frown, but the car did speed up. "So, what about poison bullets?" Emil asked. "I've had a long day," Remy said. Nope, you're not getting away with that," Emil said. "We're busy?" Remy tried. "Assuming he continues to move in the same direction, we have over an hour car ride ahead of us. So talk." "You and talking," Remy mumbled. "Why couldn't you just be a secretive, suppressed secret agent, like everyone else in our family?" Emil shot him a glare. "Emmy," Remy whined. "Remington." "Okay, so it may have sort of been my idea." "Remy." "See, this is why I didn't want to talk about it." "Please, tell me this is not why you wanted me to watch Virgil tonight," Emil said. "Oh, yeah," Remy winced. "Remy, you have to at least tell me if you're getting me and Virgil involved in this sort of thing. Or better yet, not do that. What was I supposed to do if someone had come to the door to kidnap Virgil? Which they did, by the way." Remy shifted in his seat. "To be fair, the plan didn't go exactly how I expected it to. You were just a precaution in case it took too long. I didn't expect to die. Or at least if she was going to try to kill me, I thought she'd hesitate more than 0 seconds. Emil spared him a glance as he merged onto the interstate. "Okay, fine, so maybe I should have," Remy admitted. "But she was up to no good. And I know I'm supposed to be on desk duty, but I'd heard through the grapevine about her plans, and I was in the neighborhood. How was I supposed to know she'd see right through my lie about asking for money to buy Virgil a car?" "Maybe because you've never asked the woman for anything, ever, especially in relation to Virgil, and Virgil hasn't even taken driver's ed because he's still too scared to try and drive after the golf cart incident." Yeah, whatever, babe." Remy brushed him off. "Anyway, we were talking, and I think she maybe got a little pissy that I wasn't drinking the wine she gave me. It was probably poison now that I'm thinking about it. Anyway, she must have finally gotten tired of me and pushed a button. Suddenly, a bunch of guards were storming the room, and man, they were definitely the shoot first, ask questions types, because they immediately started shooting at me. Luckily, I was wearing the lightweight bulletproof vest Logan had got me, and I dove under her desk. And let me tell you, for how organized she is about her criminal empire, and how clean the rest of the house is, she doesn't clean much under her desk. I think it's probably because she doesn't let any of the maids in there to clean. Honestly, that might be where Janice gets the whole leaving snack wrappers and tissues all over the house. Because, gee, her desk and... Remy. Right, so I was under her absolutely filthy desk, and I look up, and she's standing there staring at me, and she just takes out a gun and bang, shoots at my head. Luckily it missed, but it ricocheted off the desk and ended up in my calf. You were shot in the calf? It's no big deal, I'm fine, Remy said. Anyway, those were the poison bullets. You got shot with a poison bullet? Yeah, so, luckily, it was a poison I got doused with once in Italy in my 20s, and if you manage to survive it once, you're good forever or whatevs. But, I knew she thought it would kill me, so I played dead. And then after that, she called in Gilbert. You know Gilbert? The butler with the little trapezoid-shaped beard? Yeah. So Gilbert comes in, and she's like, get rid of this body. And he's like, cool beans, or something to that extent. Anyway, he drags me out of there, but the thing is, Gilbert's cool, or maybe not cool, because he'd totally bury my body without flinching, but he's cool enough not to kill me himself, or even run and tattle. So I go, yeah, not dead, and he's like, "'Kay, but don't tell her I knew that." And I'm like, jolly good, mate. So then I run off to her office, the secret one, not the one her and the armed guards are in, and steal the flash drive. I go to get in my car, but she already ordered it to get blown up. I mean, rude, bitch. At least give my body time to cool. So I end up hiding in the back of the catering company van that had come to get the kitchen ready for whatever gala she's throwing later on tonight. Which, I mean, really, you're serving shrimp and salmon? What kind of monster are you? You do seafood and steak, not seafood and seafood. Ugh, why did I ever have sex with her again? Anyway, I ride out in the van to the town and then bolt out of there before they can see me. Then I get on a bus because I have a bus token in my wallet. But the bus driver is a bit chatty, and this is a covert mission, so I tell him my name is Gilbert, since Gilbert the butler was on my mind, and I am visiting my new granddaughter in the States, but I'm actually from Quebec, and I spoke French to prove it. I was going to get off near the one clothes shop on 3rd, but then we drove by your office, and I saw your car, so I got off at the corner and picked your lock to get in the car and waited for you to come out because I thought that'd be quicker. You're doing the thing, Emile said. What thing? Remy asked flippantly. The thing where you use misdirection and slang to attempt to distract people from serious issues. Remy slunk down in his seat. Ah, that thing. Damn him and his stupid fancy psychology degrees. Is your leg okay? Smart's like a bitch, but it was just a graze. I already bandaged it up and disinfected it. Good, Emile said. Would you prefer if I yelled at you in chronological or alphabetical order? I'd like to see you try out alphabetical. Well, Emile started, first of all. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 9. After a few minutes of silence, Patton glanced over at the kiddo to see that he was curled against the car door, fast asleep. Patton grinned at the cute sight. He was an adorable little carjacker. Thinking on that. The knife was left abandoned on the seat next to his thigh. Patton reached over carefully and grabbed the medium-sized kitchen knife. He slid it into the pocket on the driver's side door. A practiced criminal the boy was not, which brought forth the question of why he had carjacked Patton. He was clearly running from something, but what, and why? Patton wished the boy would tell him his name. If he gave Patton a last name, he might be able to figure out who he was. If he was going to Green Bellow Foods, that meant he somehow knew about the agency, or at least he knew someone who did and figured they could help. He'd said his dad knew the owner. Patton could surmise from that statement that his father probably knew Logan, was possibly an agent, and that he was likely dead. Patton wondered if the death was recent and the reason the boy was on the run, or if it had happened a while ago and the initiator of this situation was something else. Either way, he was awfully young for, well, whatever was happening to him. Patton didn't actually know. Whatever it was, it made Patton sad. Patton continued to drive toward their destination and listening to the silly radio station the kiddo had picked out with wry amusement for another 15 minutes before anxiety started to stir. His eyes flickered open, and he made a confused noise, squinting at his surroundings. He looked over at Patton, and Patton did his level best to not coo at him. "Tired?" he asked. Anxiety made a grumbly sound and moved to rub the sleep out of his eyes. As he moved his wrist, a flash of red light caught Patton's eye, and apparently Anxiety's as well. He moved his wrist away from his face and blinked at it for a long moment. Patton watched confusion and then fear flash across his features. He ripped the bracelet with its blinking red light off his wrist and rolled down the car window. He'd thrown it out onto the interstate before Patton could even process what was happening. "What was that?" Patton asked, confused. "It's a tracker. I'm being tracked," he fretted. He wrapped his arms around his abdomen like he was going to be sick and curled forward into a ball. "Hey," Patton said softly. He reached over to touch the boy's shoulder. "Hey, it's okay." "It's not," the boy said, his breathing starting to come fast. "It's not okay." "Let's calm down and think about this," Patton soothed, rubbing a circle into his skin with his thumb while looking for some place to pull off. "How do you know it's not someone good looking for you?" he asked. "Because my dad gave me that tracker, and my dad's fucking dead." Oh. Patton had assumed, but it was still sad to hear. From the tone of his voice, Patton assumed it was recent. "Well, does anyone else know about it?" he asked. "I don't know. I don't think so," he said. He started to yank on the sleeves of his hoodie, stretching the fabric near his wrist. "Maybe my uncle." "Did you try to get into contact with your uncle at any point before running?" Anxiety shook his head. "I didn't have time, and I didn't want them to track my calls, so I turned my cell phone off." "Well, you're already being tracked now," Patton pointed out. "Calling can't do any more damage, and it might do some good if you can get a hold of him." He bit his lip. "I guess you're right. Maybe I should try." He reached into his front pocket and pulled out a phone. He held down the power button until the screen lit up. "That," he said, staring at his phone screen, "is a lot of missed calls." "From who?" Patton asked. "It's a couple of unknown numbers." His body language screamed terrified as he looked at the screen. "Hey," Patton said, "do me a favor before you call?" "What?" he asked. "Reach into the pocket on the back of the seat you're on and grab what's inside." Anxiety squinted over at him. "This is a trap, isn't it?" "What trap do you expect I keep hidden in there?" Patton asked, amused. "I don't know. A gun?" "Ah, yes," Patton said, unable to stop himself from grinning. "The age-old trap of giving the person who carjacked you a gun." "Well, maybe it's a bomb." "In my car?" Patton said slowly. "Where we both currently are, sitting a few inches apart." "A snapping turtle, then," Anxiety snapped. Patton just glanced over at him with a raised eyebrow. "Fine," he muttered. He turned slightly in his seat and reached his arm around the back of it. He pulled the contents out and brought it into the front seat. "A teddy bear?" he asked, nose wrinkling adorably in his confusion. "His name's Barnaby," Patton said. "Why?" Patton asked. "Well, he has to have a name." "No, why do you have a stuffed animal named Barnaby in your car?" "He's for emergencies," Patton explained. "What type of emergencies need a teddy bear named Barnaby?" "This type of emergency," Patton said. "You can squeeze him when you're feeling anxious, Anxiety." He winked when the boy looked over. Anxiety rolled his eyes, but squeezed the bear's pudgy stomach once. "Thanks," he said after a moment. "Of course," Patton said. "Now why don't you try calling your uncle?" Anxiety took a breath. "Yeah," he said. He typed a couple of buttons and then put the phone to his ear. "It went straight to voicemail," Anxiety said. "That's bad, isn't it?" "It could be, but Patton didn't say that. Maybe he just has his phone off for some reason. Is there anyone else you could call that might know where he is or anything about what's going on?" Anxiety thought for a few seconds, and then he was messing with his phone again without responding to Patton. He pressed his phone to his ear and waited. He pulled it away after a moment and held down the power button until it turned off again. He stuffed the phone back in his pocket, eyes shining with tears. "Hey," Patton smoothed. "Why don't I get off at the interstate at the next exit and we can figure out what to do?" "I'm not going to the police," Anxiety replied. "That wasn't what I was suggesting. Continuing down the interstate's going to be pretty predictable if you're being tracked. We need to figure out what the next best option is from here." "You're probably right," he conceded. "Why are you even helping me, though?" "You seem like a good kid." "I kidnapped you at knife point," he pointed out, but undermined his point by sniffling a little bit. "A good kid in a spot of trouble, then." Anxiety gave him a skeptical look, but Patton just kept driving until he found the next exit at a small town. Patton pulled into a gas station parking lot. "Get the map from the glove box, please?" Anxiety leaned forward to do so and handed it to him. "Okay," Patton said, looking at the map. "We've been driving for about 2 hours on the interstate, minus our stop for dinner, and we're in Bluesburg." He pointed at the little town on the map. "So, We're about 100 miles away from the factory. Now we've got two choices. Continue to travel on the interstate or find some back roads. Patton looked over the map and did some calculations in his head. He'd never taken the back roads from Bluesburg to the base before, but he'd driven all around this area at the request of Logan, who insisted his agents have a good lay of the land. Patton had used that excuse to make his brother take him on many ice cream runs over the years. Logan was always mad when he figured out halfway what Patton had done, and would rip into him about being lactose intolerant, but could be soothed with mint chocolate chip. The back roads would probably take about 45 minutes extra, Patton said, but would be less predictable. Back roads, Anxiety said without hesitation. It was what Patton was going to suggest anyway, so he nodded. All righty then, he agreed. I'm going to have to get gas really quick. Why don't you run in, go to the bathroom if you need to, and grab a snack while I do? I'll give you money. He reached into his wallet and grabbed a 20. Give me a coffee, please. We might be up late. Ooh, and a donut if they have any at this time of day. If not, one of those prepackaged cinnamon rolls are fine. Anxiety said. But aren't you my prisoner? Patton raised an eyebrow at him, and then he blinked down at the car seat. Where's the knife? Patton reached over to pat him on the shoulder. Wait, am I kidnapped now? He asked. If you were kidnapped, I wouldn't be sending you in to get snack food, silly, Patton said as he brandished the $20 bill in his direction. He took it slowly, his nose scrunched up. You're a weird adult, he mumbled. Why did I choose the weird adult to kidnap? He turned and opened the car door before walking into the gas station. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 10. Janice could feel his heartbeat speed up as he looked at his phone, but he didn't dare let that show on his face, even though she couldn't see him. He calmly clicked the talk button on his phone. Hello, Mother. How can I help you? He asked. I'd like an update on the situation with the Gates boy, she said. I'm currently on his trail, Janice informed her. He had an unfortunate head start because of Kinsley, but I have managed to find out that he went to the nearby grocery store and saw him on security footage. I should be making more progress soon. I see, she replied. The boy used his phone. Janice took a half-second to pause at that. Well, that's good for our aims, Janice replied levelly. I assume you were able to track the call? Yes, she said. He was attempting to call his uncle. He has managed to get impressively far. I will send you the details of his location. She paused. Wait. It seems he's currently attempting another call to an unknown number. Strangely, there doesn't seem to be a record of it in any database. You wouldn't possibly know the number 499-555-0721? Fuck, that was his other phone number. The phone number of the phone he broke earlier. No, I don't, Janice lied. God damn it, why did he break that phone? She hummed, seeming to accept that. I see you are still at the grocery store. I'm sending people to meet up with you at that location. Oh, fuck. Is that really necessary? Janice asked, sounding bored. Surely I can handle it myself. It will be more efficient to have multiple people working together, especially with a drive that far, she said. He could tell by her tone that there was no room for argument. Of course, Janice replied. Good. I have already sent them to your location. She hung up without another word. Janice looked down at his phone. Well, he said, I'm dead. That bad, huh? Remus asked. She's sending people to help me. Shit. You said the security cameras upload straight to the cloud, right? Janice asked. Yep, Remus confirmed. Well, no way out of it then. His phone beeped with details about Virgil's location. Calmly, Janice walked around the car and opened the door to get the atlas Remy had gotten him when he turned 16. He'd scoffed at it because of GPS, but he'd kept it even when he'd gotten rid of the car Mother had given him for the same occasion. He opened the map of the state and circled the location Virgil was at on the map. Just as he finished that, he was also forwarded the names and locations of 2 goons coming for him. Convenient, he said, glancing at their current positions. Remus, remember all the times you've talked about wanting to blow this car to hell? Yes! he said excitedly. To be fair, it's any car, but yes! Wait, Roman said. Why are we blowing up the car? Distraction, Janice replied. The path they're on should take them over the Washington Bridge, so if we blow it up on that should delay them by quite a bit. Plus, Mom can track the car, and they'll probably loop back trying to find me. Isn't there, a better idea, maybe? Roman asked. Remus reached over and put his hand over Roman's mouth. Shh! Roman, let me have this! Roman shoved him away. We'll go get one of your cars, drive mine to the bridge, and Remus can do his... He waved his hand at him. Thing. I still don't think... Trust us, Roro! Remus threw an arm around his shoulder. See, that makes me think this is even worse of an idea. Look, Janice spit out, I know my mother, and as soon as she figures out I'm fucking her over, they'll be literally gunning for us. Blowing up the car will delay them as well as destroy the tracker and any information they can get from the car. Okay, Roman agreed, though he still didn't seem comfortable with it. Apparently he'd gotten all of the responsibility in the womb. Speaking of, Remus had already taken the laptop and packed it up before throwing it none too gently into the trunk. Remus winced, but Janice shrugged. It was going to get destroyed anyway. In fact, Janice tossed his phone into the trunk with it. Janice couldn't resist smiling at the excitement in Remus's eyes as he slammed the trunk closed and made his way to the passenger seat. We're taking my car, though, Roman insisted. I'm not getting in that death trap. Having seen the car for himself, Janice nodded. Agreed. They drove back to get Roman's car, and then Remus requested grabbing something from his own car. Why do you even have that in your car? Roman shouted from his car's window as Remus unpacked explosives from his trunk. In case of emergencies! What type of This type! Janice just shook his head, and Remus packed the explosives into the trunk of Janice's car, and then himself into the passenger seat. Then they drove away toward the bridge only 10 minutes away. Remus wiggled in excitement in his seat. Calm down. Janice attempted to snap, but it just came out fond. Disgusting. Remus just gave him a dopey smile. Janice turned back to the road. I hope you know this means your cover is blown as well. Yeah, well, it was only a matter of time anyway, he said, shrugging. I will have to move, though. That's going to suck. Janice hummed noncommittally. Ooh, we should go in on an apartment together. Janice glanced over at him in surprise. What? And we can get a cat, Remus said instead of answering him. I love cats, but my current apartment won't let me have one. That'll be on the list of things to look for. An apartment that allows pets. Why would we be moving in with each other? Janice asked. Well, you're not going to be living with Mommy Dearest after today, and we're best friends. We're partners, Janice replied blankly. And best friends. We'll discuss this later. I have too much to think about right now. Remus shrugged and started rambling about how big the bomb is going to be. Meanwhile, Janice did his best to firmly shove the words best friends down as far into his subconscious as possible. They arrived at the bridge quickly, and Janice parked his car in the middle of it. Roman parked at the other end of the bridge. Well, don't leave anything in the car, Janice said. Remus nodded, back to bouncing up and down in his seat at the prospect of the imminent explosion. Janice trusted Remus to know what he was doing with the explosives, and simply walked away from his car toward Roman's. There was a loud explosion when they were about 200 feet away from the car. Janice suppressed a flinch. You could have waited until we were completely off the bridge, Janice commented mildly. But we look cooler like this, Remus argued with a manic grin. Plus, I saw a car coming toward the bridge on the other side, and I didn't want them to get on the bridge before the explosion. Roman had his window rolled down when they approached. Remus is in back. Remus put a hand over his heart like he'd been wounded. I'm your brother. I should get shotgun. I am not allowing you access to the radio. I've been on too many road trips with you. Dad's the one who insists on playing a mix of geek rock and explicit rap music, which he doesn't completely understand the lyrics of, Remus pointed out with a pout. "And I should have disowned the both of you years ago. Get in the back seat." "But—" Janice ended the sibling dispute by getting into the passenger seat himself. Remus grumbled as he got into the back seat. Janice opened the atlas and found their current location on the map. "Get on the interstate heading east," he instructed Roman. The question of how on earth they were going to find Virgil when he was moving rather quickly crossed Janice's mind, but he smothered it. They'd stop and do some investigation once they were closer to his current location. It would be fine. Roman glanced over at him as he started to drive and sighed. "You may have control of the radio as passenger," he offered. "Just please do not betray me." Janice sent him a wry smile and let himself get distracted messing with the radio. He flipped through a few stations before landing on one that seemed to be devoted mostly to Latin pop. "Yes," Roman said, "a great decision." "No," Remus whined when they stopped on that station and leaned back. "You're supposed to find the one that annoys Roman the most. It's in the spirit of road trips." "That seems ridiculous," Janice commented. "It is," Roman agreed. "No, embrace the spirit of the road trip." "Well, finding a station that Roman likes seems to annoy you the most, so I guess I am embracing the spirit of the road trip." Remus made a mournful sound and Roman chortled. "You're my new favorite person," Roman said. Janice found himself smiling despite himself. "Just for that, I get naming rights for our cat," Remus informed him seriously. "What cat?" Roman asked. "Janice and I are going to get an apartment together, since his mom's going to try and murder us both, and we're going to get a cat." "Ah," Roman said, as though that made total sense to him. Janice supposed growing up with Remus made it easy to accept such statements. "Don't let him name it. He'll name it something stupid." "I will not." "You tried to name our hamster Sexy Dorito," Roman exclaimed, and then looked at Janice. "Who names a hamster? Who names anything Sexy Dorito?" he asked. "The same person who accidentally dyed his hair neon pink on a covert mission," Janice answered. "Hey," Remus said, leaning forward to insert his face between the driver and passenger seats. "No!" "Put your seatbelt on, Remus," Janice ordered. "Oh, you've got to tell me about that one," Roman said. "No! Don't betray me, Janice!" Janice did, in fact, betray him. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 11. Virgil smiled awkwardly at the cashier when he entered the gas station and went straight to the coffee machine. He went ahead and grabbed the largest cup size for Patton because they were going to be on the road for a while. He didn't quite understand why the man was going to be driving for Virgil when there was no knife involved, but hopefully it wasn't a trick. It was probably a trick. He should probably tell the cashier he'd been kidnapped. But then the cashier would definitely call the cops, and, knowing his mother, Virgil would definitely be screwed. So, instead, Virgil put the lid on Patton's now-filled coffee cup and found that there was one plain donut with chocolate frosting still in the case. He grabbed that and then searched around the candy aisle for a bit. He finally settled on a pack of Red Vines and grabbed a blue raspberry slushie. If he was going to get axe-murdered by some guy that kept a stuffed bear named Barnaby in his car, he was going to do so with a blue tongue. He handed over the $20 bill to the cashier and then gathered up the snacks and drinks to take them to the car. He caught Patton with his phone in his hands while he was pumping gas. "Hey, what are you doing?" Virgil asked. "Just sending a text to my brother so he doesn't worry too much," Patton replied quickly. Virgil gave him a suspicious look. When it became clear that Virgil wasn't going to willingly take a step closer to the car after that, Patton sighed and held out his phone. "You can see," he said. Virgil set the drinks and snacks down on the hood of the car and took the phone. The phone indeed was open to just a string of emojis sent to someone called Lolo in Patton's phone. The string of emojis read, shopping cart, cheese, 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 coffee, car, baby, knife, sad, car, hamburger, fries, ice cream, phone, mouth zipped shut, radio, crying, sleeping, shocked, feet, hand with phone, teddy bear, gas, map, coffee, sunglasses, thumbs up, heart. There is no way he'd understand that, Virgil said. I barely understand it, and I lived it. He paused. I am not a baby. Patton snatched the phone back. I didn't say you were. You typed knife baby in emoji, Virgil said. Baby with a knife, actually, Patton said, unrepentant. He grabbed his coffee and donut off the hood of the car and opened the driver's door to put the drink in the cup holder and the donut on the seat. Then he went to finish up pumping the gas. Virgil frowned, but he did pick up his snack and drink and get into the passenger seat. He'd already thrown his lots in with the possible serial killer anyway. Patton finished pumping the gas and got back into the car. Don't sit on your... He sat on his donut. Oops, he said. He sat up and grabbed the donut to take a bite. Still good, he declared with a grin. Virgil rolled his eyes and took a long drag of the slushy. Don't get brain freeze. Whatever He froze, choking on the word. Patton looked over at him, his face turning serious suddenly. Hey, kiddo, the man said softly. He reached over to put a hand on his shoulder and looked at him with warm, earnest eyes that made Virgil want to believe his words. I'm going to make sure you're okay, okay? Virgil looked away from his far too knowing eyes. You don't even know me. Why would you? I like helping people when I can. A couple hours of driving aren't much to make sure someone is safe. I spend a lot of my life driving anyway. What do you even do? Virgil asked. I mostly do odd jobs for my brother. That doesn't sound like a real job, Virgil said. He started the car and began to back up as he answered. Do you know much about real jobs, then? He asked. Well, Virgil said, no, but still. Patton smiled over at him. Okay, I answered a question about me. Did he, though? Virgil narrowed his eyes at him. Now you answer a question about you. Why? Virgil asked suspiciously. Well, we have an hour and a half of driving left, and neither of us are kidnapped anymore. We might as well get to know each other. What's the question? What's your favorite subject in school? Patton asked cheerily. Really? Virgil asked. Is this what we're doing? Patton just smiled over at him, and Virgil went about tearing open his package of red vines. English, he said, taking a bite of his candy. I always liked history myself, but English was fun. Virgil hummed. You have any family other than your brother? He asked. Lo has 2 sons. They're twins. Cool, Virgil replied. Favorite color? Purple. So you don't have kids then? Not of my own, Patton replied, but I helped with the twins when they were younger, and I like to think of all of my co-workers as my kiddos. Virgil's face twisted up. He didn't know much about adult workplaces, but I'm sure they appreciate that, Virgil scoffed. I like to think so, Patton said, seeming to not even register the skepticism in Virgil's tone. Was the man ever anything but chipper? Favorite movie? Ratatouille, he said on instinct, and then felt his stomach drop. His favorite movie was Ratatouille because Uncle Emile always insisted on playing it during movie nights. Dad would complain loudly because he knew that Emile and Virgil would spend the rest of the night making jokes about Dad having the same name as the rat. I don't want to play this game anymore, Virgil said, choked. Patton glanced over at him in surprise. Okay, he said softly. Virgil was thankful he didn't try to push. They drove for another 10 minutes. Virgil did his best not to think about everything, but it got increasingly harder. He tugged on the sleeve of his hoodie, his slushy and red vines forgotten. Finally, Patton looked back over at him, his eyes concerned. Virgil curled into himself, expecting him to try to needle Virgil into talking. Instead, he just smiled sadly at him. Why don't we play a different game? Sure, Virgil agreed. Might as well. Maybe it would help. What game? Ooh, Patton said. How about I kill your cows? Lo always threatens to kill me by the end of that game. And that's a good thing? Virgil asked. Yeah, Patton said, because that means I'm winning. Virgil puffed out an amused breath. Okay, how do you play? He asked. Well, Patton said, basically, when you see a group of cows, you can claim them and say, I have 10 cows, or however many there are. Whoever says it first gets the cows. If you see a church or other place people get married, you can say, I marry my cows, and then your cows double. If you see a graveyard, you can say, I kill your cows, and reset the other player back to 0 cows. If you see a barn, you can say, I put however many cows in that barn, and then the cows go in the barn. When they're in the barn, they can't be killed, but they can't be married either, and you have to wait to see another barn before you can take them out again. All right, Virgil agreed. Sure, why not? Great, Patton said. There's a field of them up there. Since you're new to the game, I'll let you grab the first few. Virgil squinted at the cows in the field. I have 6 cows, he said. Nice job, Patton said. Virgil rolled his eyes. He didn't know what was impressive about counting a few cows, but he smiled a bit anyway. They continued to play the cow game for a while. Patton was obviously really good at this game, and obviously trying to not be as good at the game as he actually was, so that Virgil wouldn't lose by 1,000,000 cows. They turned on the radio after a while. Unfortunately, the conspiracy channel had fizzled out by now, so they turned to a local station that played a mix of music. Can I take horses? Virgil asked after about 20 minutes of play. Sure, Patton replied. Go ahead. Okay, I have 4 horses. Ooh, Patton said. That horsey is a palomino. I'll trade you 2 cows for that horse. Virgil was pretty sure that's not how it was supposed to work, but Patton was 18 animals ahead. 20, Virgil countered. Patton glanced over at him. 5. 15. 10. 11, so I'm winning for once. He thought about it for a long moment. Deal, he finally said. Yes, Virgil said excitedly. I'm winning. Patton smiled over at him. I have 5 cows, he said. Virgil's head shot up to look out the windshield. There were, in fact, 5 cows in the pasture right in front of them. Damn it! Patton coughed meaningfully. You can't murder me like that and then get mad when I cuss, Virgil grumbled. Aw, cheer up, kiddo. At least we haven't found a graveyard yet. But when we do, you will guiltlessly murder all of my cows, Virgil said, because you are truly evil. Patton just laughed at him. Virgil grumpily reached forward to turn up the radio so he could ignore him easier. The song that was playing faded out as he did so, and the radio jockey came on the air. Quick traffic update. There's been an accident on I-26. A semi-truck full of cattle rolled over near exit 52 and eastbound traffic has been stopped. If you're on I-26, we suggest you find an alternative route as it will take a while to get all of the cows rounded up. Well, I'm glad we got off the interstate when we did, said Patton. Yeah, agreed Virgil. It would suck to be stuck in the middle of that. He paused and listened to the radio jockey continue to explain that the semi had been carrying at least 150 cows. Hey, Patton, can I claim cows remotely? Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 12. Remus sulked in the back of Roman's car. It wasn't fair. His brother and his best friend were both in the front seat and had been mocking him for the past 10 minutes, and they wouldn't even put on an interesting music station. Roman had even told Janice about the time Remus had peed on a wasp sting, thinking it would work like it did for jellyfish. We should play a car game, Remus suggested. Absolutely not, Roman said immediately. Come on, Ro, it's tradition, Remus said. You kill my cows every time, Roman said. You could kill Uncle Patton's cows since he's always winning, but you always choose to kill my cows. But Ro! No. Fine, Remus relented. No cow game. Thank you. I spy with my... No, Remus. Remus paused. I'm thinking of an animal. I'm not playing, Remus. They sat in silence for about 20 seconds. There's a Kentucky driver's license. 1 point for me. Roman chose to just ignore him now. Janice, you'll play with me, won't you? He asked. Remus, I don't even know what you're talking about, and you're already annoying me, was the answer. Come on, if we're going to listen to stupid music, we should at least play a game. How about we try to find things outside of the car in alphabetical order? I'll start. Airport sign. Now you find something starting with the letter B. Does the annoying bastard in the back seat count? Janice grumbled under his breath. No, Remus replied with a grin. It's gotta be something outside of the car. Janice didn't respond to that, and Remus pouted. He went through a bunch of different car games he knew, and tried to make some up, but none seemed to entice either his brother or Janice to play. While usually he might just give up after being ignored so long, he noticed Janice's hand start tapping a restless pattern on his leg after only about 10 seconds of Remus's silence. So Remus decided to drop the car games and instead just focus on being as annoying as possible. The wheels on the bus go round and round. I'm going to kill him, Janice said blankly. That's what he wants, Roman said mildly. Just ignore him. Remus kept singing for a long time. Eventually he ran out of verses, so he just started to make some up. The strippers on the pole. Oh my God, Janice said. I can't handle this anymore. Seriously, Jan, Roman said, just pretend he doesn't exist and he'll eventually wear himself out. In how long? Janice said, just the slightest edge of hysteria to his voice. It depends on if he's had any caffeine today. Remus kept singing, but Janice and Roman remained resolutely silent on the matter until Remus eventually trailed off. This is boring, Remus said. Nothing. At least change the radio station to something not lame. Janice reached forward and turned the volume on the radio station up. Remus sat back in his seat and thought for a few minutes, which is when he tuned into the radio station. So if you'd like to request a song, you can call in or send a request through our new app, the man on the radio said. Remus smiled widely and grabbed his phone from his pocket. When he turned it on, he had a bunch of missed phone calls and text messages from Dad. What? He opened the text messages, and they all seemed to be asking the same question. Have you seen your brother? Remus glanced up at the back of Roman's head. I'm not his keeper, he texted back. Then he closed out of the Messenger app and pressed the button for the App Store. He quickly found what he was looking for and pressed the download button. It took a couple of minutes to download, and about when it was over, he noticed Janice shoot a look back at him. He opened his mouth, doubtless to comment on Remus's silence. Not wanting to be suspicious, Remus opened his mouth and let out his patented banshee scream. Don't look at him! Roman yelled over the sound of Remus's scream. Why is your brother a demon from hell? Janice asked, hands over his ears. Remus ran out of air after a moment. There was a beat of silence. Can I please kill him, Roman? Janice asked. No, Roman replied. Really, just ignore him. Janice grumbled under his breath and turned the radio station up even more. Satisfied that they were none the wiser, Remus opened the now downloaded app and quickly found the Suggestions tab in the menu drop-down. He didn't even have to check the given list of suggested songs to know that what he wanted was not on it. So he tapped the button to suggest a different song and typed in the details of what he wanted before pressing send. Then it was just a waiting game, and no matter what Dad, and everyone else, had always said, Remus was good at waiting games. At least, he was when he wanted to be. Both Janice and Roman were looking resolutely ahead, and Roman's fingers were tapping to the beat of the current song on the wheel, despite the fact that they were going over the speed limit to a crazy amount. Then the song ended, and a man came on the air. Hello, 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 the man said. We'll be getting right back to your suggestions on KSSFM 102.9. But before that, for anyone on Interstate 26, there was an accident near the Carlson exit involving a semi-truck full of cows. If you're anywhere near exit 52, I'd suggest you move right on and over to an alternative route. Fantastic, Janice hissed, slamming his fist against the dash. Whoa, hey, it's fine, Roman soothed, but Janice didn't seem to be listening. Fuck, he said. Hey, Jan, Remus said. You've got your map, right? Yeah. So it'll be easy to find an alternative route, yeah? He asked. We don't even know where we're going, Janice said. "How the hell are we supposed to find an alternative route?" "You know where he was, right?" Remus said. "The cows might actually be a good thing. It'll probably slow everyone down, and we can guess what alternate route he might be using." Janice didn't say anything. "Here," he said. "Gimme." Janice handed over his atlas, and Remus peered at it. "Yeah, here, see?" he said, showing it to him. "There are about 4 likely alternative routes someone might take where Virgil was last we knew. 3 of them end up funneling into Lincoln to get back on the interstate, and Lincoln has an ice cream shop that got burglarized 5 times one summer, so they put up a security camera facing Main Street." "Please tell me you didn't burglarize the ice cream shop," Roman begged. "You can prove nothing," Remus said. He hadn't, actually, but he liked the distressed noise Roman gave in answer. "Anyway, I'd say we throw in our lots with that and drive to Lincoln to check the security camera. Even if he didn't go that way, we can then make another guess based on where the 4th route went." "That," Janice said. "Yeah, that's actually a good suggestion, Remus. Thank you." "No prob, Janny Fanny." "And you ruined it," Janice said. Remus just gave him the biggest smile he could. Janice rolled his eyes and turned away from him to look back at the map. He grabbed a pen and circled the location that Remus had suggested. "You'll want to get off at the next exit," he told Roman. Roman nodded. "Got it." Remus had actually almost forgotten in the interim about his absolutely fantastic idea until a few minutes later when the radio man announced the next song. Remus could already feel a smile creep up his face as the man snickered a little bit when he started speaking. "Now," he said, "we usually wouldn't play this song, but it does seem appropriate considering the trucks that crashed on I-26, and the person who suggested it wrote about why he wanted us to play it in the comments." He broke for another short laugh. "As a sibling for myself, I feel sympathy for your plight, D. Dogmaster 5000. So here's for you, stuck in a car while your brother and best friend hog the radio. I hope your road trip goes well." And then, beautifully, the radio started singing the song of Remus's soul. 2 trucks having sex, 2 trucks having sex. My muscles, involuntarily flex. Remus saw Janice look over at Roman. Roman didn't look away from the road. Instead, he just said, with zero emotion, "Kill him." Janice vaulted over into the back seat as the radio crooned, "2 pickup trucks making love, American made." Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 13. Remy was slumped down in his seat as Emile continued to lecture him on all the possible consequences of his actions over the past 24 hours. Jeezy crazy was Emile miffed about all that. Remy had been trying to blow it off, but Emile was painfully aware that he'd almost lost his brother today, and Remy was going to hear about it until Emile's lungs ached. "And another thing," he said. "Wait," Remy said, and Emile did because there was a lace of panic to his tone. "What?" Emile asked. "The tracker stopped working," Remy answered, pushing the buttons a little bit desperately on his device. "It went completely offline somehow," Remy said. "Did it get turned off?" Emile asked, "or run out of batteries?" "It doesn't turn off, and the batteries are designed to last for years," Remy said. "It can even track through 20 feet of water. The only way it could stop sending a signal this abruptly is if the thing was destroyed." Emile paused. "You said Virgil knows what the blinking light means." "Yes." "Is it possible that he knows, knows, that you're dead? Barbara did send a man after him. He could have mentioned it." Remy stared down at the device in his hands. He pressed a couple of buttons and studied the screen for a moment. "You little shit," he groaned. "You threw it out the fucking car window, didn't you?" "How do you know?" Emile asked. "Because if I look at the history, it was going 65 miles per hour down the interstate, suddenly stopped cold, and then went offline, probably when another car inevitably crushed it." "Ah. Well, at least the fucker's probably okay. Damn it, Virgil, where were you going?" Remy pushed a few more buttons, almost idly as he thought. "Let me get into Virgil's head for a minute. emo music, dark clothes, would rather have his toenails ripped out than go to parties, makes split-second decisions based on little info. Yep, got him. Emil rolled his eyes, but Remy wouldn't have noticed as he had his own eyes closed. So, I'm Virgil. My bitch mom killed my dad and sent someone after me. I have no idea what's going on, but I bolt out of there because fuck mom. I want to get the hell out of Dodge, so I convince someone to drive me somehow, I guess. But where would I want to go? Someplace safe? Where's safe? Maybe Emil, but obviously that's not where he went. Or Janice, but he's too connected to Mom. I don't really know anyone else, especially not someone who could help with this sort of stuff. Remy thought for another long moment. Oops. Oops? Emil asked. What oops? He could tell by the expression on Remy's face that he was not going to like the answer. I may have let something slip. What do you mean, Remington? Well, you see, Remy said, a couple months ago Virgil was being, himself, a little shit. He may have possibly found some papers. What kind of papers? Emil asked. They were nothing important, Remy assured. There wasn't any dangerous info in them or anything, but it is somewhat possible that they had the name on them. How possible? Emil asked, eyes narrowed on him. He asked what Green Bellow Foods was and why they needed 50 top-of-the-line computers outfitted in an old factory. And what did you tell him? Nothing! Emil glared at him. Okay, well, I had to tell him something, Remy mumbled. I just kind of said that I knew the owner well and was working with him on some stuff, and I told him not to worry about it, which was probably a mistake because he's Virgil, so then I found him snooping in my car. At that point, I had to sit him down and talk to him. So I told him a little bit about Logan. Remy, that's not nothing. I didn't use his name or anything. I just told him a couple of really, extremely, tremendously vague stories, so he didn't think I owed money to the mafia, which, yes, he did suggest. That's worse! What do you want from me, Emil? Some common sense, Emil answered. I've been comparing you to the Rat and Ratatouille for years, but I'm starting to think you're more of a Pinky from Pinky and the Brain. Hey, ouch, Remy replied. Also, I personally subscribe to the theory that Pinky is actually the intelligent one who's foiling Brain's evil plots from the inside. So there. Now is not the time, Emil said. Oh, it's not the time to discuss cartoon theories? Remy mumbled into his lap. Must be serious. It is serious. Virgil is missing. Don't you think I know that? Remy snapped. I know, Emil. There was quiet. Emil took a breath. Okay, he said, calmer. Do you really think he's going to Logan? He's headed somewhere, Emmy answered. And wherever that somewhere is, it's inexplicably down the most direct route towards base. Well, Virgil is smart. I don't think he'd just keep going so quickly without a destination in mind. We should call Logan. Do you honestly believe Barbara doesn't have your phone tapped when Virgil is missing? If you had one of Logan's phones, I might agree with you, but as it is, we'd be giving away our position and possibly cluing her into Virgil's plan. If he shows up at base, Logan will take him in, no question. It's less dangerous for everyone this way. Fine, Emil said. We'll just keep driving toward Logan and hope you're right about where he's going. Of course I'm right, Remy said lightly. I've got the parental instincts going on. Of course, they didn't stop that knife-throwing incident of '09. I blame Janice for that, though. Emil shook his head at him. It is good for when he tries to steal sweets, or that one time he brought home a baby piglet and tried to hide it from me in his bedroom, or when he's feeling anxious about something but won't tell me because he thinks it's silly. Remy's own fingers tapped out an anxious pattern against his knee. It also worked with the golf cart incident, but it was too late. Again, I blame Janice. He messes with the parental instinct meter. He's far too unpredictable, and I make the mistake of thinking he's responsible, which he is half the time, but the other half of the time I remember that he's still mostly a kid, and one that grew up in an unstable environment. Did I tell you that last month they went and won a bunch of tickets at the arcade, and used them to get those 5-ticket rubber ducks, and just unloaded them all over my room? Honestly, you'd think a 21-year-old would have a better use for his money, or at least have the brains to go buy them at a store. He could have gotten like 500 more ducks for the same amount of money. Of course, it was his mom's money, so I guess I can get behind wasting it on arcade games and rubber ducks. The prank apparently was based on some comedy sketch Virgil found online. You're doing the thing again, Emil pointed out calmly. Stop psych-evaluating me, he shot back. Fine, Emil said. Keep distracting yourself from your emotional responses with silly stories. See if I care. Thank you, Remy replied. I will. Emil sighed as he started back up again, mumbling something about having taken away Virgil's Game Boy after catching him playing it at 3 a.m. He claimed this wasn't because the boy hadn't gotten any sleep on a school night, but because he'd insulted Donkey Kong to Remy's face. After that story had run its course, Remy continued to babble at an increasingly fast pace about all sorts of things. Emil imagined most of the stories he spouted off were quite embellished. Emil had tried to turn the radio on once, but Remy had slapped his hand away, saying, "The next one's a really good one." So he had resigned himself to his fate of tuning out Remy's coping mechanism to the best of his abilities, and just focused on driving for the next 45 minutes, which is probably why he noticed that the traffic had strangely decreased. He didn't really pay the fact much mind until the traffic suddenly increased, in the form of a wall of stopped cars. "Jenkies, what's going on?" he asked, as he came to a stop at the end of the line of cars. Remy said, looking out his car window. There, staring into their car with beady black eyes, was a cow. As Remy watched, said cow leaned forward to drag its tongue across the passenger side window. Shit. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 14. "You two doing okay back there?" Roman asked, glancing into the rearview mirror at them as he exited the interstate onto Highway 236. "We're perfectly fine," Janice said evenly. "Ow! Ow, ow, ow! You're crushing me!" Remus complained. Janice was currently sitting on his chest, pinning him to the back seat. "You should probably put your seatbelt on," Roman advised. "You're probably right," Janice agreed. "No! Get off!" Remus said, "or I'm going to scream!" "Oh, because you don't scream randomly when someone isn't sitting on top of you," Janice shot back. Roman officially liked Janice. He'd just decided. "Give me that," Janice said, and a moment later Remus's phone was thrown into the passenger seat. Remus whined, and Roman glanced back at them once again, amused. That is when he got sight of a car behind them. He glanced at his speedometer and then back at the car. Roman was currently going a little over 90 miles per hour, having slowed down a bit now that they were off the interstate, yet the car was gaining on them. "Hey," Roman said. "What?" And that's when a bullet came through the back window right past Janice's head. "Holy fuck!" Roman screamed, swerving a bit before getting the car back under control. Remus grabbed Janice by the front of his shirt and pulled him down as more bullets rained on them, courtesy of the car Roman had spotted. The glass from his car's back window shattered over the two of them. Roman pressed his foot down harder on the accelerator and started purposefully swerving to throw off their shots as Remus shoved Janice down onto the floor so he could lunge into the front seat. He grabbed the gun Roman stored in his glove box and loaded it with practiced ease. "My bag," Janice requested, and Remus threw the asked-for object over his shoulder before rolling down the window. "Methinks Mommy Dearest people may have found us," Remus commented. "What was your first clue?" Janice asked, digging through his bag, assumedly for his own gun. Remus stuck his gun out the window and popped off a shot at the car behind him. "You weren't kidding about your mom trying to kill you, huh?" Roman asked. "I betrayed her," Janice said blankly. "It isn't a surprise." "Shitty mom," Roman commented. Janice didn't say anything, just finished loading his own gun and moved to roll down a different window. He shot off 3 shots in quick succession as Remus reloaded his own weapon before ducking down again as more bullets fired towards them. Gee, Roman thought about Dad sending agents after him with a shoot first, ask questions later order. It was unfathomable to him. Dad's policy was to attempt to not kill whenever possible, even if someone was an enemy, let alone Roman. Yet Janice was not even close to surprised that his own mother's men were clearly shooting to kill. There was no question as to what their orders were. They weren't aiming for the wheels or trying to cut them off. They were gunning straight for the people in the car, particularly Roman at the moment because he was driving. Roman scrunched down in his seat as much as possible. He glanced back at the car and saw that it had moved to the other lane. "Oh, no, you don't," Roman grumbled as Janice and Remus continued to fire. He jerked the steering wheel to cut them off from trying to get alongside them and pushed down even harder on the accelerator. Janice finished emptying his clip and went to reload. "There are grenades in my bag," Remus told him. "Why do you have grenades in your bag?" Roman asked. "For when I'm on a high-speed chase with people shooting at me," he yelled back. Janice found the grenades in the bag. "One of these days you're going to pull a grenade out of your ass, and I'm not going to be surprised," he said to Remus. "Huh, that's not a bad idea," Remus said cheerfully. "If you even try it, I will tell Dad on you so fast," Roman told him. He again spun the steering wheel to cut off the car behind them. "You're no fun, Ro," Remus claimed, crouching down again to reload once more. "And I'll tell Uncle Patton," Roman threatened. He had to speed up even more to cut them off as the car behind them tried to pass them in the left lane again. "No! It'll be like the wasabi lecture of '07, Remus bemoaned. "Can the two of you give it a rest for 5 seconds? Janice asked. "Nope," Remus answered as he went back to shooting. "Might want to get those grenades going, Jan." Yeah, I got it," Janice replied. He pulled the pin on one and went to toss it. Unfortunately, just as he was throwing it, a car popped up over a hill Roman hadn't seen coming directly towards them. Roman yelped and turned the wheel so fast that his arms crossed over each other. Janice made a startled noise as he was thrown half out the window, and Remus squeaked as he ended up flat on his back against the center console. A rogue bullet from Remus's gun hit the top of Roman's car as the grenade got thrown far off course into a ditch. Janice cursed loudly, shoving himself back into the car on his back. The car behind them also managed to make it into the right lane before it careened into the car Roman had just avoided. He saw the brake lights of the vehicle he'd passed turn on as Remus groaned and shoved himself back up, grabbing the gun from where he'd dropped it. Roman figured he was okay when he went straight back to shooting out the window. "You okay, Jan?" Roman asked when the man stayed laying on the back seat. "May have broken a rib on that one," he said. Yet, after a moment, he still managed to struggle back into a sitting position once more. Well, Roman had to give him props for that one, but they'd be checking him out the next moment they weren't being chased by people shooting. Roman glanced back in the rearview mirror at the said car, and had the car Roman had almost hit turned around and also joined the chase? Fantastic. Roman sped up once again as Janice grabbed Remus's bag. Another bullet shot through the shattered back window straight past Roman's head and embedded itself in the windshield. Roman flinched and was almost distracted enough that he didn't notice the yellow sign warning of a curve ahead and a suggested speed limit of 35 miles per hour. "Uh-oh," Roman said. "Stop shooting and brace yourselves." He saw both Remus and Janice scramble to obey and slammed on the brakes. The steering wheel wobbled, but Roman was able to just barely keep enough control to not spin out. He tried to turn the wheel, but when he saw the curve, he knew immediately that he was not going to be able to pull that one off. He winced and continued to try and slow them down. They smacked into a delineator marking the curve, likely tearing it out of the ground, and rolled a bit down the hill toward some sort of pond or maybe a lake. They stopped right before they hit the water, and Roman had a split second to be relieved before his torso was thrown forward as the car that had been chasing them crashed into them and sent them straight into the body of water in front of them. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 15. The next 2 hours were the most frustrating ones of Logan's life. It seemed like the entire universe, or perhaps more accurately, his entire family, was doing its best to make his life and job as stressful as possible. He'd stepped away from his desk for less than 1 minute to make sure Darlene and Frederick's comms were set up to his specifications. He had them outfitted with what he would usually give to undercover agents. It was a constant stream of audio from their side, and Logan could talk to them with a click of a button. It was on an entirely different frequency than anyone else used, and, barring damage to the actual equipment itself, it should never go offline. When he got back to his desk and checked his phone, he had a missed call and a text message from Patton. Of course. Of course. In the 30 seconds he is away from his desk, someone finally calls him back. He opened the text message. His first thought was, "Patton, you are lactose intolerant. Why are you buying so much cheese?" His second thought was that the stream of emojis was unintelligible. What about a baby? And a knife? If he just bought cheese, why did he need to go get a burger, fries, and ice cream? And on that account, why more dairy? He tried to call Patton back, but as he was beginning to expect at that point, there was no answer. Frustrated, he slammed his finger down on the end call button. I have no idea what that means, he texted him back. He set his phone back down on his desk after making absolutely sure that his ringer was at full volume. Be sure to track all traffic updates in their path, Logan said. The other people in the base snapped to attention, their fingers going to work at their keyboards. Then he pushed the button on his desk. Frederick? He asked. We just got on I-25, Frederick replied instantly. Good, Logan replied. He sat down in his chair to rub at his eyes and grabbed his phone once more. He shot off texts to different people in a pattern he was getting very used to at this point. Then he went back to look at Patton's message once again. Why must you always use these infernal things? He asked the text from his brother. He looked over his shoulder and saw Clara looking up. Clara, he said. She flinched at his tone. Yes? She asked hesitantly. Are you literate in the emoji text message language? He asked. Yes? She said. He stood and placed his phone in front of her. Can you make sense of this message from Patton? He asked. She said, looking at it with a perplexed expression on her face. I'm getting... He bought a lot of cheese. Then he kidnapped or got kidnapped by a baby. He got fast food and then did other things. And he got gas and coffee. He says everything's cool and he loves you. He got kidnapped by a baby? Logan asked skeptically. She gave him a helpless shrug. That's what he said. He got in his car at the grocery store, but there was a baby with a knife and the baby made him drive. Well, thank you for trying, Logan said. He took his phone back from her and wandered back over to his desk. Okay, Darlene was saying over the comms, but why do you even need chair covers for your apartment? To prevent damage and stains, Frederick said back. You bought them for $20 at a yard sale. They're already stained. Even more of a reason to make a seat cover for them. It'll make them cuter, and since I'm sewing them, I can personalize. See, look, here's the pattern I'm using. Fred, I'm driving. They continued to chat idly about Frederick's latest sewing project. Logan was just content to have an open line of communication with his agents. They eventually moved on from arguing the merit of chair covers and went on to discussing the pattern and color options. Well, at least Frederick was discussing it. Darlene had descended into non-committal hums, yeps, and I can't look at that because I'm driving. Do you like this flower design or this flower design better? Frederick was asking. The first one, was the answer. You didn't even look! Boss, there's been an accident on I-26, Emerson informed him from his desk. Where? Logan asked. Around exit 52. The actual accident was only on the east side, but it was a truckload of cows, so it'll likely affect Fred and Lena's path. All right, Logan said. Find me the quickest alternative route. Emerson nodded and turned back to his computer. Logan pushed the talk button. There is an accident ahead of you, he informed Frederick and Darlene. We will be giving you an alternate route. Stand by. Yes, boss, Darlene replied. Have them take exit 65 and get on Highway 236, Emerson instructed. Logan nodded and pressed down the button again. You'll want to get off on exit 65, he told them. You'll take 236 until you're past the accident. Got it, Darlene replied. We just passed mile marker 61 a few seconds ago, so we'll be there soon, Frederick offered. Darlene and Frederick exited the interstate without any problems. It was a few minutes later that, with the obnoxious sound of a saxophone, the song titled We Are the Number One Bad Guys, which was reportedly a mashup of a song from a children's show and a pop song, started blaring from his phone. Usually he'd be annoyed by hearing that sound, as Patton and Remus had said it behind his back, and he couldn't figure out how to change it. Today, however, the sound was a relief. He grabbed his phone to look at the text message from Remus. I'm not his keeper, is what the text said in response to Logan's many messages asking him if he knew where his brother was. Logan stared at his phone for at least a whole minute. What's wrong, boss? Clara finally hesitantly asked. I, Logan said calmly, love my children. Uh-huh. Logan typed back a message he was certain at this point would not get a response, and then he hit the talk button on his desk. So, Frederick, he said, tell me more about those chair covers. You mentioned flowers? Frederick's voice said, yes? Logan glanced up at the other agents in the room, who were all staring intently on the designs on their desks. Have you considered Paisley? Logan focused on listening to Frederick and Darlene's conversations while the rest of the office focused on not looking at him unless it was to update him on the traffic for Frederick and Darlene for the next 15 minutes. "Whoa!" Darlene suddenly said, and Logan could hear the sound of braking through the sensitive listening devices. "What?" Logan pushed the button to ask. "There were a couple of cars in our lane," Frederick said. "Was that a gunshot?" Logan asked when there was a loud pop on the other end. Give us a minute, boss," Darlene requested. He could hear the engines turn after a moment, likely as they accelerated again. "What's going on?" Logan asked. "We're in a car chase now, apparently," Frederick replied, voice strained. "Why?" Logan asked. "I recognized the first car," Darlene said. "What do you mean you recognized the car?" Logan asked. Shit, Darlene said. Logan could hear the sound of tires squealing. A few seconds later, there was a huge crash, followed by a couple of incredibly loud splashes. "What's going on?" Logan asked. There was cursing on the other end of the line in response, and the sound of 2 doors slamming shut and then running. "Darlene! Frederick! What is going on?" There were a few more seconds where he could hear the sound of breathing, and then the sound cut out halfway through the sound of a splash. "Frederick?" Logan said. "Darlene?" He took his finger off the button. "Please tell me we didn't just lose signal," he said to the room at large. There was silence. "Please, somebody tell me we didn't just lose signal to the high-tech spy gear I put on our agents." After a pause, Emerson finally spoke. It's not waterproof, sir." "I see," Logan said, his tone serene. "It isn't waterproof." He looked down at his hand settled on top of his desk, next to the useless talk button and the phone that no one seemed to be willing to call or text with anything useful. He turned his hands over, grabbed the bottom of the desk, and flipped the whole thing over. His computer smashed on the ground, and the normally well-organized pens and papers scattered across the floor. "Well, why the hell isn't it waterproof?" No one dared to answer his question, and Logan pinched the bridge of his nose, surveying his broken computer and overturned desk for a few minutes. Eventually, he straightened. "I need to borrow someone's desk," he said. 3 people scrambled to their feet, but he held up a hand. "I'll use Darlene's." They all scrambled back to their desks. "And send someone after those 2. He strode over to Darlene's desk and sat at her computer. He pulled up every local news outlet he could find. They needed to find a new starting place, because he honestly didn't know where to go from here. He spent an hour trying to piece together what exactly was happening out there with news articles, police scanners, and other information channels. There was an explosion an hour and a half earlier in the city where this had all started, and he worried that had something to do with the lack of communication, as it was on the road from Nelson's base to the city. However, that still left almost 2 hours before that of silence from Roman and Janice unaccounted for. There were also 2 separate break-ins to the security office of the grocery store down the street from Remington Gates' home, which Logan imagined somehow was connected, but he couldn't figure out how. And what did the cows have to do with it? Anything? Everything? What was going on? There was no news about whatever had happened with Frederick and Darlene, and the other team of agents he sent after them were still 20 minutes out from their last known location. Boss?" a tentative voice said. Logan looked up at Clara, who was standing at the edge of the desk. She flinched on the expression at his face when he looked up. "Unless a member of my family or Virgil Gates has arrived at this base, I don't want to hear about it," he snapped. "Well," she replied, "actually..." Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 16. Remy met the beady little eyes outside the car window with a glare. The cow gazed back at him, a challenge in its eyes. "What are you looking at, future mincemeat?" Remy asked. "They're dairy cows," Emile said, head on the steering wheel. "How the hell would you know?" Remy asked. Emile looked up at him. "The crashed truck says Robinson's Family Dairy." Remy pursed his lips. "That doesn't mean anything." Emile gave him a droll look. "Maybe they're the rejects." Remy turned back to the cow. "I bet you're too stupid to make milk, huh?" The cow let out a breath that fogged the window between them. "Bastard," Remy grumbled at it. "You're talking to a cow," Emile reminded him. "Oh, like you don't talk to stuffed animals," Remy shot back. At least I don't make enemies with them and insult them. She deserves it! She's just standing there. You're taking out your frustrations on a farm animal. Remy looked back at the cow, his eyes narrowed. Its eyes peered back at him, and they did not need to share a language to understand each other in that moment. "I'll show you a coward," Remy growled, taking off his seatbelt. "No, Remy," Emile hissed. "Don't you dare!" Remy ignored him and opened the door to climb out of the car. "We are on the interstate!" "Now you listen here," Remy said, staring the car down. "You've already caused enough problems for me today. The least you can do is not stare me down in my brother's car. You feel me?" The cow stared at him blankly and made a mooing sound. "Are you understanding the words that are coming out of my mouth right now?" "I promise you she isn't," Emile said from the car. Remy continued to stare the cow down. Finally, after a minute of staring, the cow turned away. "Ha!" Remy said. "I win." "Get back in the car before you get trampled by a herd of cows," Emile said. "I'm not going to get trampled," Remy insisted. "If anything, I'm establishing myself as their ruler." "Is this a productive use of your time?" Emile asked. "Oh, what?" Remy said, turning back to him. "And sitting in the car is such a better use of my time? Thank you for your input, Doctor." "Remington, please." "Oh, stop with the full name bullshit." He turned to the car nearest to him. "No offense intended," he assured it before turning back to Emile. "You are not our mother." There was a pause. "Remy," Emile said calmly, "I know you're upset about Virgil, but—" "In fact," Remy talked over him, "I'm older than you. Do you remember who put you through college so you could get that fancy degree you keep using on me tonight? Because it certainly wasn't our mother, because she was already fucking dead. Don't act like you're the parent, because here's the thing, I raised you by myself for 3 years, so if I'm a shitty dad, then you're definitely fucked up somewhere under that shining topcoat of head doctor crap." "I never at any point said—" Emile started, but Remy cut him off. "Oh, we both know you're thinking it." "Don't put words in my mouth, Remy." No, Remy said. "I know exactly what's going through your head. I never should have been a parent, and I proved that to you when you were a teenager, but I still managed to knock up literally the worst person I could. I'm constantly making horrible parenting decisions, and even when I try to be responsible, I mess it up. Virgil's third word was a curse word, and I'm lucky he never developed scurvy because I let him eat whatever he wants. He's currently on a cross-country road trip with God knows who because I fucked up a covert mission I had no business being on, and now he's being tracked down by the person who shot me with a poison bullet. I'm a horrible person and a worse dad. That's what you're thinking." There was a second where his brother looked at him with his stupid, annoying face. "Have you considered that you're projecting?" "Ugh!" Remy threw up his hands and turned to walk away. "Remy, where are you going?" Emile called after him. "I'm walking to base to go get my kid," Remy called back. "It's over 70 miles away." He turned around and spread out his arms. "Then I'll ride a bloody cow. It'll be faster at this rate." "They'll be cleared up in a few minutes, Remy. Come back here," Emile said. Remy flipped him off. "I am not following you on foot." "Good." Remy turned back around and strutted off down the interstate, skirting cows and police officers the whole way. He grumbled to himself and refused to turn back, even when he was pretty sure by the flow of traffic that the accident must have been cleared 15 minutes later. This was so stupid. Why was he so stupid and useless? Emile was probably glad he ran off like a petulant toddler so he wouldn't have to deal with him. He'd probably be more effective at finding Virgil without Remy messing it all up anyway. He kept walking. After a couple of minutes, a car slowed down and stopped next to him on the side of the road. Remy looked up to meet Emile's eyes through the rolled-down window. "Get," Emile said firmly, "in the damn car." Remy blinked in surprise and then hurried to do so. Emile didn't speak again until the car was back at a normal speed. "His first word was Dad," he said, "and he's happy. I'm not a parent, but from what I've observed, parents are allowed to mess up. As long as they do their best and their kid knows they're loved, they're a pretty good parent. If you ask me, you're a good dad." Well, his second word was pizza, so I don't know if that makes me that special," Remy grumbled. Emile glanced at him. "I mean," Remy continued, "thank you and sorry." "Apology accepted," Emile said. "You know I love you, right?" "Oh, God, don't get all mushy on me." "I'm serious," Emile said. "I've been angry at you this entire trip because if you died today, I don't know how I would have handled it. You were reckless, and it could have easily gotten you killed." "Don't you think I know I'm stupid?" Stop that, Emil snapped. That is not what I said. Well, then what are you saying? I'm saying why, Remy, Emil said. Are you bored? Do you want to go back into the field? No, Remy said quietly. Are you sure? Emil asked. Remy didn't answer. If you do, that's fine. It's not, though. You're the one that made that decision, and it was 15 years ago, Emil reminded. If you want to change your mind, that's fine. But if you're going to do it, you can't just go do it. You have to talk to Logan first. To me, to your kid. Your actions affect other people. I know that. I know you know that, but you get so involved in your own head sometimes and forget to think about the consequences. Or worse, you ignore them because they're too hard to think about. Remy reached forward and turned on the radio. Really? Emil asked. Chill, Remy said, turning the volume down. I just don't want to have another car disaster. Remy nodded and seemed content to wait for him for a few minutes so he could gather his thoughts. I'm trying, Em, Remy said. Bless their souls, but I'm trying not to be our parents. It's like walking a tightrope. Go too far one way, you're an asshole. Go too far the other, and your kid's running from his mother's hired guns and throwing out the tracking device you put on him because he thinks you're dead. It shouldn't have to feel like that for you. Yeah? Remy asked. And how do you propose I stop it? Emil looked over at him and opened up his mouth. Yeah, see a therapist. Do you have any suggestions that don't require me to bare my soul and talk about my daddy issues to some random person? No. Rats. Emil chuckled at him. If it's any consolation, they would have hated how you turned out. I mean, they 100% would have still loved you and would have adored Virgil, but you'd get so many side eyes over the dinner table. I mean, a child out of wedlock, Remy? They'd have tried to get me to marry her, Remy said. Then I would have introduced them to her, and they would have said, fuck that. Do you think I could have gotten Dad to say fuck that? Emil giggled. That would have been weird. Remy hummed in agreement. Then they petered off into silence. I love you too, Em. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 17. Aw, come on, kiddo, Patton beseeched, doing his absolute best not to laugh at the adorable discontent expression on Anxiety's face. You murdered all of my cows, the boy grumbled. All of them! Patton did giggle then. That's the game! You knew! Anxiety insisted. You knew the cemetery was there, didn't you? You're familiar with this highway. That's why you let me take the 150 cows, you cheater! Patton didn't bother to deny it. All's fair, he said instead. You're the worst, Anxiety shot back. Why don't we play a game I can win? Like what? Patton asked, curious. He said, let's play a game where whoever's the youngest wins. Patton chuckled. Well, I guess you got me beat there. Or a contest to see who has the straightest hair. Sounds like a fun game, but we'd have to wash both of our hair just to be sure neither of us is cheating and has product in. There was a pause, and Patton glanced over at him. Aw, he cooed, do you secretly have curly hair too? Anxiety groaned. That's adorable! It is not, he grumbled, folding his arms over his chest. It ruins my aesthetic. Aw, stop being so grumpy, kiddo. Maybe I wouldn't be if you hadn't murdered all of my cows. I sure did kill the mood, ha. Anxiety groaned. What did I ever do to deserve this? Carjack? I know. Anxiety huffed. Patton smiled over him and reached over to ruffle up his hair. Ugh, stop! No! I want to see the curls, Patton teased as Anxiety batted him away. You're lucky I don't have the goddamn knife. Excuse me, was that a bad word, mister? Anxiety groaned. I will turn this car around, Patton threatened. Oh, yeah, Anxiety said. That's what would make you stop driving. Silly me. I'll try not to use the grown-up words. See that you don't. Anxiety just shook his head and turned the radio up a bit to ignore him. Cows have been cleared up, Anxiety noted. Patton hummed. Do you want to get on the interstate again? He asked. It would be about 10 minutes faster, and I'm sure if anyone was tracking us, we lost them and all of that. Sure, he agreed. I don't see why not. Patton nodded and took the next turn back onto the familiar interstate. "So," Patton hedged once they were back on the main road, "we'll be there soon. What are your plans once we get there?" "Nothing in particular," he rushed to say when he saw the kid frowning. He was a secretive little thing. "Just what do you want me to do?" "Oh, he said, playing with the edges of his hoodie sleeve. "I don't know." He paused. "You can leave if you want." A smile flickered across Patton's face. "Not likely, kid." "Well, I'm not going to leave, at least until I make sure you're with someone." "Thanks," Anxiety said softly. "I'm with you all the way, Anxiety." "I still don't understand you at all." Patton just shrugged and smiled. "Also, you can call me V." "Ooh, a partial name," Patton said. "I'm moving up in your esteem." "I didn't say that," V snapped back. "My name might be Bob for all you know." "Right," Patton agreed. "Of course. Bob. My bad." That caused V to smile, even though he seemed to be fighting it. After a few moments, the smile faded, and he started playing with the strings on his hoodie. "You've got to get back to your family, though, eventually," he said. Patton shrugged, not mentioning the fact that they were literally driving towards his brother this very second. "They're all adults who can more than handle themselves. My brother's older than me, and the twins have him. You need me a bit more right now." V thought for a moment, still rubbing his fingers over the frayed edge of the hoodie string. "I have an older brother," he offered. "Oh?" Patton asked. "I tried to call him earlier, after my uncle," V said. "He didn't pick up." "Well, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for that, just like with your uncle." V bit his lip. "I don't know if," he said, "if he'd be on my side in this or not." "What do you mean?" V looked out the window. "Our mom's the one who killed my dad," he said softly. "Oh, honey," Patton said softly. "I'm so sorry." "So, I don't know if my brother would side with her or not. I don't want to think he'd hand me over to her if I went to him, but..." Poor kiddo, Patton thought. He wished he could say with certainty that his brother wouldn't do something like that, but Patton didn't know enough about him to know for certain. He hoped not. "I'll help you figure it all out," Patton promised. "I'll make sure you don't have to go with your mom." V snorted. "I don't know what you can do, but thanks for the sentiment." "Oh," Patton said, "I think I could do a thing or two." "Sorry," V said dryly, "but your reaction to a carjacking was to get me ice cream." Patton laughed lightly. "Good point." "I really don't want to go with my mom, but I don't think cops would listen to me," V said. "She's technically my mom, even though I've never even spent the night at her house. Does that make her my legal guardian now?" "If she's the one who killed your father, I doubt people would let you go with her." "You don't know Mom," V mumbled. "I'm sure no one would even think to try to arrest her for that, let alone convict her. Would they let my uncle be my guardian, even if she isn't arrested?" "They'd be willing to do that, I'm sure, especially since you're already 15. Anyone would listen to your opinion on where you live." V looked at least a bit relieved at that. "So you like your uncle, then?" Patton asked. "He's great," V said. "He lived with us when I was really little. He always made me eat my vegetables and helps me out when I'm anxious. He's a psychiatrist, so he knows his stuff." "I have a friend whose brother is a psychiatrist," Patton said. "I've never met him, but Logan sends people to him when they need mental health care. It's a big help for a lot of them." "Yeah," V agreed. "It wouldn't be too bad living with him, I guess." "Well, I'll make sure you end up with him and not your mom, okay?" "Sure," V replied. Patton shot him a half smile, and they continued driving for a few minutes before he exited the interstate. "We're almost there," he told V. V bit his lip. "I hope this wasn't a stupid idea," he said. "Oh, I'm sure it's fine," Patton said. He flipped a switch on near his steering wheel that would open the gate for them a few seconds before said gate came into view. He drove up the driveway and chose to park in front of the factory instead of trying to park in the underground parking garage, which would certainly freak V out. "Just looks like a creepy abandoned factory," V commented, eyeing the old concrete building with its boarded-over windows. "It's almost too perfectly abandoned," he said, eyes narrowed. "Smart boy." "Ready?" Patton asked. V still looked nervous, but he nodded determinedly after a moment and exited the car. Patton followed him. He let V lead the way up the gravel path to the entrance of the building. He studied the door for a couple of minutes and then pushed it slowly open. Patton was sure at this point that someone downstairs had probably noticed them and would come up to greet them soon. V was looking around himself with suspicious eyes. "Okay," he said. "What do we do now?" "Probably just wait and see if anyone comes to meet us," Patton said. V started poking around a bit. "It's pretty clean for an abandoned factory," he said. "Mm-hmm," Patton replied. He considered a couple of panels near the door, and Patton observed him, curious about what he'd do. He made a startled noise when one of the panels came off. "Oops," he said. He peered into the hole he'd just made. "Well, that's not good. Whoever put that camera there is probably not going to be happy with me." Patton had to bite his lip to keep from laughing. The person who put the camera there would not. V set the broken panel back against the wall. It hung off of it awkwardly. "At least we know there really is someone here, and it's not just an abandoned factory." "That is good," Patton agreed. Just then there was a soft ding, which Patton identified as the hidden elevator the room over. V's head shot up to look in the direction of the sound, and the boy shuffled closer to Patton. Logan himself rounded the corner after a moment and looked at them with his lips pursed and looking especially cross. "How is it," he asked, "that you always do exactly what I need you to do in the most irritating and inconvenient way possible?" Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 18. Janice had a couple of seconds to regret every decision he'd made in the past few hours before Roman's car hit the water. He'd managed to brace himself enough to not go flying into the front seat, but he was still jerked around by the impact. The airbags in front went off when they hit, which was just his luck, and the car immediately began to fill up with water. Roman and Remus were already struggling to get the airbags out of the way, and Remus reached over to release Roman's seatbelt since he hadn't been restrained himself. Janice jerked over towards the window to try and roll it down. It rolled down about an eighth of the way before the automatic system gave out and the window got stuck. Janice took a split second before he dove for Remus's bag to grab out a hammer he'd noticed in it earlier and swung at the window, shattering it in 2 goes. Roman and Remus had already noticed the broken open window, and so Janice went ahead and pushed himself out of the window and towards the surface. He immediately noticed that there was a figure swimming towards him through the water, and tensed for a fight, assuming it was one of the people who had been chasing him. He struck out with a fist, half blinded by the water in his eyes. There was a startled yelp as he felt cartilage snap under his fist. "Hey! Fuck!" a figure said in response. "Janice!" Janice blinked the water out of his eyes as the familiar, if slightly distorted, voice sunk in. "Lena?" Janice asked, as Remus popped his head out of the water next to him. She glared at him, holding her nose with one hand and treading water with the other. "Shit, sorry." Remus seemed to notice what was happening and swam forward to give her a bit of support. Roman popped up, sputtering a moment later, and smacked Janice across the face. "Karma," Lena spat. "How are you even here?" Janice asked, rubbing his nose. "Everyone went dark, and Logan sent us to go figure out what was going on," she explained. "Then we saw Roman's car in a high-speed chase and followed you." "Speaking of," some other guy's voice called from a few feet away, "can I get a bit of help?" One of the men from the other car had popped up out of the water and was currently wrestling with him. Remus stayed to help Lena out of the water, but Roman and Janice both swam over to help the guy with Lena drag the first guy from the other car and then the second one out of the water. "Fred," the other man with Lena, introduced himself while he and Janice trussed up the men from the other car. "Janice," Janice answered. "I figured," Fred replied. Janice gave him a confused look. "You were one of the names the boss was angrily mumbling about this evening." "Yeah, well, Logan can shove it," Janice grumbled. Fred didn't comment. Instead, he just stood up and looked at the 2 men tied up on the ground. "Well," he said, "Lena's car is only a 5-seater. Guess you 2 are going in the trunk. Want to help me out, Janice?" Janice and Fred hauled the 2 men into the trunk together, despite their muffled protests, and Fred slammed the trunk closed. Roman was looking at Lena's likely broken nose, but she shoved him away after a bit of fussing. "Where have you 3 been?" she asked. "We've been busy," Janice said. "Too busy to answer your phones?" "They broke." "All of them?" she answered with narrow eyes. Well, Remus said, now that mine is at the bottom of a lake, yeah. Fred looked over at her. What about our communication devices? She blinked. Boss? She said to thin air. There was no response. Shit. You did just drive into a lake, Janice pointed out in a drawl. Lena sighed. All right, I guess we're driving back to base to report in person. We were actually heading to Lincoln, Janice said, crossing his arms. Lena crossed her arms right back. Well, you don't have a car anymore, she pointed out. It's us 3 against 2. Roman piped in. Actually, he rounded on him. Oh, come on, Roman, he snapped. Roman put his hands up in a placating motion. Look, dude, Dad's already looking for your brother, and we're sort of at the end of our rope. We can go to base and regroup. We'll share what we know, he'll share what he does, we get another car, and we can start fresh. Oh, like Logan would be willing to share anything with Janice. He'd already made it abundantly clear that he didn't trust Janice. What other reason would he have for trying to get him out of the way when Virgil was missing? Janice would probably be locked in a cell as soon as he got to base, so Logan could make sure he didn't interfere or give his mother information. He looked over at Remus, hoping for some sort of support, but got an apologetic half-shrug in response. 4 against 1, then. Of course. They might as well just toss him in the trunk, too. Fine, Janice spit out. Whatever. Fred, you might have to drive, Lena said, poking at her nose. She winced. Roman slapped her hand away. Don't do that, he said. I wish we had ice. We have ice, Fred said, opening the backseat door. Why do we have ice? Lena said. I brought a cooler. What? When? Why? Before we left and in case we got thirsty. He grabbed a bumblebee-covered handkerchief out of his front pocket and turned to get ice out of a small cooler in the back of Lena's car. He handed the bundle over to her and turned back to Janice and Remus. You boys are welcome to a drink. He did not seem to register the frown Janice sent his way. He just smiled and took the keys from Lena before shooing them all into the car. Janice somehow ended up in the middle seat between the twins. Roman at least seemed sheepish enough to avoid Janice's gaze, whereas Remus continued to blabber like he always did, with a big smile on his face. He kept brushing up against Janice as though Janice wasn't resenting him an unbelievable amount, as Fred climbed into the driver's seat and started the car. Come on, Jan, don't pout, Remus said. Want something to drink? Janice glared at him, but that did not dissuade him. Let's see. We have apple juice, orange juice, grape juice, a bunch of different naked juice flavors. Good choice, Fred. And one of the little hug fruit barrels, grape soda, glacier freeze Gatorade, cactus coolers, Capri Suns in a bunch of flavors, and green apple ramenes. Or I could be your mixologist and make you a brand new drink out of this wonderful selection. Say no, Roman advised out of the side of his mouth. Janice glanced over at him. How about any of the Capri Suns? He said pleasantly. Good choice, Remus responded, handing one over to him. Janice did not check the flavor. He took off the little straw and removed the plastic before stabbing at the juice pouch. To his mounting frustration, the stupid straw kept slipping instead of going through the hole. Here, said Remus, let me do it for you. He took the pouch and poked the straw into it before offering it back to Janice with a grin. Janice stared at him for a moment and calmly reached out a hand to squeeze the bottom of the juice pouch. It spurted all over Remus's face. Oops, Janice said. He took the pouch as Remus sputtered a bit in surprise and turned away to stare through the front window and idly suck on the straw. Well, that means he's angry at me, Remus said. I never would have guessed, Roman replied dryly. Without a word, Janice removed the straw from the pouch and flipped it over so the juice slowly drained right into Remus's lap. Then he dropped the empty container onto his leg. Well, at least I was already soaked from the lake. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 19. Huh? Patton said, in response to the clearly fuming man that had just come into the room. At first, Virgil had assumed he was talking to Virgil, but his eyes were on Patton. What did I do? Angry Guy took a moment to pause, his fingers twitching like he wanted to squeeze Patton's neck. Do you know why I called you? Patton opened his mouth. Of course you don't, Angry Guy continued, because the only communication I've had from you in the past 5 Ours is a phone call where you hung up before I could explain anything and an unintelligible string of emojis. Well, what did you need to talk to me about? Patton asked. There was a missing child, Angry Guy said. Oh no, Patton replied. Angry Guy stared at him for a moment. Him, Patton, he said, pointing at Virgil. The missing child was him. Oh, Patton said. I guess it all worked out then. No. Wait, Virgil said. Unintelligible string of emojis? You're his brother? Now, honey, don't get skittish, Patton said, which was when Virgil realized he'd taken a step back. No, Virgil said. What's going on here? He's your brother, and he's here. Well, how exactly did you think I knew where the abandoned factory that happened to be a cover for a secret agency was? Patton asked. It's a what? Virgil asked. Patton! Patton waved the angry man off. He basically already knew. Wait, Virgil said. My dad was a secret agent? Angry Man looked a little less angry when he glanced away from Patton to meet Virgil's eyes. Yes, he said. Your father worked for me for a lot of years, which is why I sent my agents after you. I thought of him as a friend, and I'm well aware that your mother is unfit. His tone darkened considerably, for a variety of reasons. She killed Dad, Virgil said. I know, Angry Man replied, though I am unsure how you learned that information. Virgil didn't feel like answering. Instead, he turned to Patton with an accusing look. You knew! Well, I didn't know everything. You knew enough? Why didn't you say anything? Well, at first you had a knife, Patton said. He what? Angry Man asked. Then you were asleep. Then you were panicking. By that point, I was worried that trying to tell you anything would make you panic more, especially because you obviously didn't want me to know anything about you. So I decided it was better to just let you lead and figure stuff out when we got here. Virgil glared at him. This is just like the cows, he grumbled. So the cows were a part of it? Angry Man asked. No, said Patton. We were already off the interstate when that accident happened. But he just said, it's the cow game. We went past the cemetery near Hudson. Why did you go the back way? He had an active tracker on him, Patton answered. He threw it out the window, but we thought it was best to get off the interstate. Angry Man turned to Virgil. If you had one tracker on you, we should probably check you for more, just to be safe. I wouldn't trust your mother. His nose scrunched up just a touch, and his mouth turned down when he mentioned Virgil's mom. At least Virgil and Angry Man seemed to be on the same page when it came to how much Mom sucked. So you're going to help me? Virgil asked. Of course, Angry Man replied. I will make sure you are cared for. And I won't have to go with Mom. I would much prefer that you did not, and I am sure that would align with your father's wishes, particularly because he had in the past discussed such a theoretical circumstance with me, and had threatened to haunt me if I ever let you near that bitch. Virgil couldn't help but chuckle at that, even if it came out strained. Sounds like Dad, he said, and then shifted nervously. So what's going to happen now? For now, I'll take you downstairs and find you a place to rest. Usually I'd offer you food, but knowing Patton, that has likely already been taken care of. Virgil nodded. We'll figure out exactly what's going to happen once I have figured out all of the other complications of tonight. What other complications? Patton asked. Angry Man turned to him. Well, if you'd answer your phone, he said, irritation coloring his tone once again, you would be aware that everyone is missing. What do you mean by everyone? I mean, I haven't heard from Roman since he checked the bus station near his house, he gestured at Virgil, hours ago. Remus has sent me exactly one very unhelpful text. His partner, my double agent, opened the last mission request but hasn't responded in any way. Having known the man for the last 2 years, I am certain he is being completely irrational over his worry and doing God knows what. That is assuming he wasn't found out and captured. I sent Frederick and Darlene out to investigate what was going on, but the last I knew they were in a car chase and their communication device is cut out. I can't even get a hold of his uncle after our phone call was cut off while the man was screaming. That made Virgil's stomach clench in worry. He was screaming? Angry Man seemed to realize his mistake and grimaced. He glanced over at Patton as though for help. Patton stepped up next to Virgil and carefully put an arm around his shoulder. Virgil curled into the half-hug and allowed himself to be comforted, even though he planned to return to being miffed at Patton for keeping secrets later. "We'll figure everything out, and no matter what happens, I promise you'll be okay. Logan knows what he's doing, and I'm going to help." He looked up at his brother. "For now, though, let's go downstairs." "Okay," Virgil agreed. "Maybe I'll even get a full name out of you yet." "What?" Logan asked. "You don't even know who he is? Did you just kidnap a random child?" "Of course I do. He's Bob," Patton said immediately. Virgil couldn't help it. He laughed. Patton sent him a wink. "Also, I'd say he kidnapped me." "I don't care to know what you mean by that at the moment," Logan said with a sigh. "But that isn't Bob. He's Virgil Gates." "Remy's kid?" Patton asked. "You know my dad?" Virgil asked. "Remy's dead?" Patton asked, which was when the front doors opened suddenly. "Quit telling everyone I'm dead." There was a beat of silence. "Sometimes I can still hear his voice," Patton said cheerfully. "Dad?" Virgil asked. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 20. Janice was being very sulky. Spraying Remus in the face with a little bit of juice was one thing, but pouring the entire juice pouch into his lap, that was another. Clearly, Janice was very unhappy with the state of affairs. Remus was glad Roman had interpreted the shoulder bob Remus had given him while getting into the car correctly, and had helped Remus pin Janice in the middle. Remus honestly wouldn't put it past Janice to try and jump out of the car while it was moving at this point. He was clearly very strung out and in one of his bad headspaces. The first time Remus had seen him in this bad of a headspace had been a week after vacation. He still refused to explain the quotation marks to this day, even though Remus now knew who his mother was and what she did with his mother, and had legitimately planned an assassination of their shared calculus professor, thinking she was plotting against him. At the time, Remus had thought that had mostly been a joke. Having gotten to know Janice since, it was a good thing Dr. Hawkins had decided to give them a break on the homework for that week. Remus had no idea where the man's mind had gone, but he was pretty sure distracting him as soon as possible was the best move. So, Remus did the only thing he could think of in that moment to possibly shock his best friend out of spiraling into a pit of cynicism. He leaned forward and grabbed another Capri Sun, this time strawberry kiwi instead of tropical punch, out of the cooler. He stabbed the straw through the hole and then turned to Janice. "Want another one?" Remus asked. Janice blinked at him stone-faced, but then held out his hand. He took the straw out immediately after Remus handed it to him, and didn't hesitate to pour that entire pouch on Remus's lap as well. Remus nodded seriously, as though Janice had made a good point in an argument. He leaned forward and grabbed another one. "Does," he said, glancing at the label on the pouch as he stuck a straw into it, "a wild cherry one catch your fancy?" He handed it over to Janice, and once again got the entire package squirted into his lap. "Fair enough," he said mildly, reaching into the cooler once again. "How about a grape one?" They went through a Pacific cooler, a Surfer cooler, and an orange one, before finally Remus pulled out a fruit punch one. Instead of immediately tearing out the straw and dumping it on Remus, Janice hesitated at that one. After a moment, he turned away from Remus to stare forward and brought the straw to his lips. Roman was shooting them a bewildered look, but Remus just winked at him. Janice made short work of the juice pouch, and then extended a hand to drop the empty container into Remus's lap. Remus gave it a moment, and then leaned over slightly to bump shoulders with him. He paused for a second, and then bumped him again. "I don't want to talk to you," Janice mumbled. Remus paid him no mind and bumped their shoulders together for a third time. "Come on, Jay," Remus said. "No." Remus narrowed his eyes at him and then slammed into him even harder, sending him into Roman, who yelped in surprise. "What the hell is wrong with you, you cretin?" Janice spat, slapping Remus away. "Oh, so many things," Remus said. He heard Roman give a soft puff of amusement. "What about you?" "What do you mean?" "What's wrong with you?" "Well, I'm stuck in a car with you, asshole," Janice snapped. Remus tilted his head. "No," he said. "What's really wrong?" He scoffed. "What's not, Remus? My brother's missing. My dad... had of my brother is dead. My mother is trying to murder me in cold blood, and you claimed to be my best friend earlier, but now you are unflinchingly on board with turning me over to your father, who is more than likely going to throw me into a prison cell the moment he sees me." "Okay," Remus said. "First things first, Dad is not going to throw you into a prison cell when we show up." "Oh, really?" Janice asked. "And why wouldn't he?" "He likes you, Jay." "Even if that's true, he clearly doesn't trust me." "If he didn't trust you, he wouldn't let you be a double agent for him," Remus pointed out. "I'm not a double agent because he trusts me," Janice argued. "I'm a double agent because I'm Barbara Nelson's son. I was a calculated risk at best, and now I'm too much of a risk even though I was still useful." "Dad's not like that." "Maybe not to you," Janice grumbled. "Why do you think he doesn't trust you?" "Well, it's pretty obvious when he sends another agent to go pick up my brother, and meanwhile tries to send me on a different mission as a distraction to get me out of the way. Clearly he doesn't trust me not to deliver Virgil to my mother. Why else would he do that?" "Jay, did you consider that he knows you?" Remus asked. Janice raised an eyebrow. "Dude, just last week you were drunk texting me and Dad pictures of you and your brother from your childhood, many of which included Virgil's father. He may have jumped to the conclusion that you'd be upset about Remy Gates' death and that you'd act irrationally because of those feelings." Janice scoffed. "Irrational?" He asked. "What did he expect me to do?" "Oh," Remus said, "I don't know. Perhaps something like bash in some guy's skull against a water fountain in a public park, blow your cover with your mom, explode a car, smash a bunch of phones, get into a car chase, and shoot out with your mom's men that ultimately ended up with you in a lake, pour juice all over me, and spiral into a pit of thinking everyone in your life is out to get you. If looks could kill, well, Remus would have already been dead long ago, but he would have been especially dead right then." However, as it stood, Remus was decidedly not dead. He shot a toothy smile at Janice, who glared even more intensely. "All of those things were perfectly rational," Janice insisted. "And even if I were emotional, that is because my brother is missing, which your father did not know about until after he sent Roman. It has nothing to do with the boy's father." "You are worryingly good at hiding your emotions from yourself," Remus said. "I think you actually believe that. Wonder what you'll do when we find Virgil and those feelings are still not gone." "You and your father can both screw off," he ground out. Yet his tone was still somehow milder than it had been before they'd started to talk through his idea that Dad 100% inarguably hated him. So that was progress. Remus bumped their shoulders again. "Plus," he said, "if Dad did decide to throw you into a prison cell, I'd totally break you out of it, and we'd go on the run. Our future cat has to have a daddy, after all." "I don't even like cats," Janice said. "Sure, Jan. I'm going to pour more juice on you." "Kinky." "What? What does that even mean?" "It's his default catchphrase," Roman offered. "Try spinning him around and bonking him on the head 3 times. That usually resets him." "Bet I could do it in 1 if I hit him hard enough," Janice said. "I'd say no blood in my car," Lena piped in from the front seat, "but it's far too late for that." Remus said. "What's worse on car seats? Noseblood, Capri Sun, or lake water?" "We'll find out when it dries," Janice said. "I'm charging the agency for a new car," Lena grumbled. "Same," said Roman. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. Chapter 21. Emil's car, of course, did not have the built-in button that would let him into the base's outer gates like Remy's would have. Instead, Remy had to get out of the car and put his face in front of the security camera. He waved, and someone must have seen and recognized him because the gate swung open to let them through. Remy climbed back into the car, and Emil drove up towards what appeared to be an abandoned factory. "Since you're not an agent, they'll want us to go inside the shell building instead of down to the parking garage for security," Remy told him. Emil had never actually been to the base. He usually met with Logan at another location, or sometimes Emil's office, and he met any patients in his office as well. Thus, he had absolutely no idea what parking garage his brother was talking about, or where on earth it could be, but he could figure out where Remy must want him to go because there was only one building in sight. He drove down the driveway towards what looked like the main entrance of the factory. Weird, Remy said as Emil pulled up in front of it. There's another car here. They exchanged a glance. Remy mumbled something that sounded like "damn kid" under his breath. They were both scrambling to get out of the car the next moment. Remy went ahead of Emil because he knew more about this place, and also Emil would not have been able to stop him. The door had been left slightly ajar, and Emil could hear voices as they approached. Emil heard Virgil's voice, and thank God Remy was right about where he'd been going, say, "You know my dad?" An unfamiliar voice responded with a shocked, "Remy's dead?" Which was right when Remy made it to the door. Without missing a beat, Remy threw open the door and said, "Quit telling everyone I'm dead!" Now, Emil loved a good animated movie reference usually, but today he couldn't help but roll his eyes. There were a few seconds of silence before one figure he didn't recognize on sight finished the quote by saying, "Sometimes I can still hear his voice." "Dad?" Virgil asked, sounding all types of vulnerable and confused. "Kid," Remy said, "you are the bane of my existence." He put his hands on his hips. "I'm dead for 5 minutes and you skip town?" Emil watched Virgil's face as he quickly adjusted to the fact that his father was not in fact dead, but simply an emotionally constipated idiot with a flair for dramatics. He narrowed his eyes. "Yeah, and where have you been, old man?" "Running after you once the wrist tracker said you'd booked it 50 miles away by the time I knew you were missing, which then stopped tracking." "Yeah, well, I threw it out a window because I thought you were dead, and I'm not stupid." "Well, your lack of stupidity has made my life a living hell for the last few hours." "Right back at you, not dead, Dad," Virgil shot back, hands on his hips, and very much mirroring his father with his sass. Remy paused for a moment and then snorted a bit. "Come here, Pipsqueak. Your old man deserves a hug after you nearly gave him a heart attack." Virgil still looked a bit sullen, but went in for the hug anyway. Virgil caught sight of Emil over Remy's shoulder and drew back from the hug. "Uncle Emil," he said, sounding relieved. "I tried to call you." Emil turned to glare at Remy. "Ugh," Remy said. "Yeah, that one may have been my bad, too." Logan interjected. By the look on his face, Emil could tell that his willingness to let Remy and Virgil have a moment was wearing thin. "Also tried to call him." Remy just shrugged. "Yeah, well, boss, someone drilled it into my head not to give out secret critical information on unsecured lines, and I am definitely critical." Logan gave him an unimpressed look, and Remy shrugged and winked at him after a moment. He dug the flash drive he'd stolen from Barbara out of his pocket and tossed it at Logan. "Oh, and also this." Logan caught it and raised an eyebrow at it. "What is this?" "Enough information to want to kill me for it." He paused. "Of course, that's not a high bar, considering she tried to kill me before I stole it." Logan put the flash drive in his chest pocket. "I'll decide if I'm going to kill you after I look at what's on this." "Fair enough," Remy agreed. "So, you're a secret agent?" Virgil asked. "Yep," Remy confirmed. Virgil looked over at Emil. "Don't look at me," Emil said. "I'm just a run-of-the-mill psychiatrist." "Who gives therapy to secret agents?" Remy pointed out. "Even secret agents need therapy sometimes," Emil said, "and I already knew about the organization." Virgil turned back to his dad. "I'm mad at you," he said. "Ah," Remy said. "Yeah. Teach me to shoot a gun, and I'll forgive you." "No!" Both Emil and the man he didn't know said at once. "Trust me," the other man continued. Now that he looked closer, the man may have been slightly familiar, but Emil couldn't quite place where he might have seen him before. "He doesn't need to learn how to use a gun. He does just fine with a knife." Remy considered Virgil suspiciously for a few seconds at that odd comment. "What did you do, you little shit?" "Remy!" the other man chastised. "He's hurt a lot worse." Remy waved him off. The other man frowned at him, but Remy just turned back to Virgil. "Now what did you do?" "I needed a ride," said Virgil. "What about a knife?" "The knife helped me get a ride." "Did you kidnap Patton at knife point?" Remy asked. Virgil just shrugged. "Kid!" "And you allowed that to happen?" Logan asked the man Emil presumed was Patton. "He wasn't exactly scary," Patton said. Virgil looked almost affronted. "I was terrifying." "Sure you were, kiddo," Patton said. Virgil pouted at him, undermining his own point. From what I understand, he also incapacitated one of Nelson's men with pepper spray, Logan interjected. He eyed Virgil. We should have a conversation at some point in the future. Logan, Patton chided. He's 15. I'm aware of his age, Logan said. Virgil looked at him. Would you teach me how to use a gun? Hey, if anyone is going to teach my child how to use a gun, it's me, Remy insisted. No one is teaching him how to use a gun, Emile said. He doesn't even have his driver's license yet. If I agree to take driver's ed, then can I get a gun? Virgil asked. Maybe, Remy said. No! Emile exclaimed. Okay, Virgil said, completely ignoring Emile's interjection. But Janice is not allowed to teach me to drive after last time. He's the one who told me the gas pedal was the brake on that golf cart. I don't want to crash another vehicle into a body of water. Wow, a new voice said from the door. Emile looked over to see a group of damp people walk into the building. Emile did not recognize 4 of them, but he did recognize the 5th. The speaker turned to Janice. You must be cursed. Wish you would have told me before we used my car instead of Remus's. A woman in the group turned to Logan. We found your kids, she said. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 22. Janice did not respond to Roman's quip about the car. Instead, he shoved past Roman the second he heard the boy's voice. Roman recognized the kid immediately from the pictures he'd been sent along with his mission directives. Virgil, Janice said, crossing the room to get to his little brother without regard to anything else. Thank God. Are you all right? He grabbed his face and tilted it as though to look for injuries. Nothing about what Roman had learned about Janice in the past few hours would have prepared him for the way he descended directly into mother-hen mode, cupping the boy's face with delicate fingers. He was even less prepared for when Virgil shoved his hands aside with an eye roll and a, I'm fine, Janice, and Janice immediately started to cry. Janice pulled Virgil into a hug, and Roman winced in sympathy for Janice's injured ribs when the kid hugged him back tightly. They should really get that checked out as soon as the 2 of them had their moment. I've been worried sick about you, Janice said, voice all types of wrecked. The past few hours of worry that Janice had kept careful hold of lashed out suddenly, and it was even more than Roman had anticipated. I showed up to the house, and you were gone, and the window was broken. Virgil was getting a bit wobbly-lipped himself, and Roman couldn't exactly blame him with how gutted Janice sounded. Where did you go? How did you get here? How did you know to come here? Did Logan send someone else after you? Dad let the name slip, Virgil explained, and Mom sent someone to pick me up, but I'd already accidentally heard that she killed him with the radio Dad keeps in his room, so I didn't want to go with the man, and he was mean, especially when I said no. His voice cracked a bit as he spoke, and he too started crying. I didn't know where to go or what to do. At first, I just wanted to get out of the city so Mom couldn't find me, and once I was out, I decided to try to get here because Dad said he worked with the owner and no one was answering their phones. I'm sorry, Janice said. That was my fault. I broke my phone. I should have thought about you wanting to call me. He pulled back to kiss Virgil ever so gently on the forehead. Hey, what gives? Another man said, and Virgil blinked and actually looked at the other occupants of the room. Both Dad and Uncle Patton were there, along with a man he didn't recognize. Yet his attention was quickly drawn to the speaker, because that was Remy Gates, and Remy was definitely supposed to be dead. I was dead, and I didn't even get that much of a heartfelt reunion. Janice seemed to freeze for a moment, and then turned to him. There was a long, almost painful moment of silence where Janice just stared blankly at Remy. Roman recalled the short conversation that Remus and Janice had in the car about Remy, and how Janice was probably more upset about the man's death than he was allowing himself to express. Remus clearly had known what he was talking about, because there was a stunned, surprisingly vulnerable look on Janice's face as he looked at his brother's father. Remy casually put his hands in his pockets. "Sup, kid?" Roman had never seen someone's face change so drastically, so quickly. His face twisted up in a scowl and his eyes lit with fury. He looked like he was about to finish the job for his mother. "You bastard!" Janice spat. "You bastard! You aren't even dead!" Remy seemed unconcerned with the fact that the man was basically foaming at the mouth. "You sound disappointed. Do you know how much stress and hurt you caused Virgil?" Virgil, huh? Remy asked, and goodness, the man must have a death wish. Don't worry, Virgil and I already worked that out. I'm going to teach him to shoot a gun as an apology. No, you aren't, the man next to Remy that Roman didn't recognize said. Like that's a sufficient apology for all that duress. How could you? It wasn't exactly my plan, Jan, Remy drawled. Remy, please, the man next to Remy said. Oh, well, pray tell, what the hell was your plan, you absolute, ignorant, wretched excuse for a human being? Janice asked. Janice, please, the man said. Just let them do it, Uncle Emile, Virgil said with a sigh. Remy scoffed. Oh, please, there was no plan, obviously. Do you know me at all? Janice full-on exploded with that. What the hell is wrong with you? Where do you get off on being such an idiot all the time? You have a 15-year-old child, and you just waltz into danger like it's nothing and almost die? I thought you were dead. And, seriously, Remy really must be comfortable with the concept of his own demise after whatever had happened to him earlier, because all he said was, What, would you have missed me? No, Janice said. Far too intense for that to be the truth. In fact, tears started to perkle at the corner of his eyes. Aw, Remy cooed, still mocking, but perhaps just a bit gentler now. He walked the couple steps to Janice and threw an arm around his shoulder. Don't cry, kid. I'm okay, I promise. I'm not crying, Janice insisted, even though his voice cracked a bit and the tears were starting to escape out of the corners of his eyes. He attempted to push Remy away, but his efforts were weak and easily resisted. He gave up a moment later. You're crying. I'm really not, Remy said with a chuckle. You will be if you don't shut up and let go of me, Janice insisted, even though when Remy tugged him closer into a proper hug, he folded himself into the embrace like a small child and proceeded to cry into the man's shoulder. Well, that was an event. Roman didn't know what to think about Janice at this point. He'd been cold, calculating, and scary at the beginning of their adventure, and now he was sobbing into a man's arms. Aw, there it is, said Remus cheerfully. Janice didn't look at him, but he pulled one of his arms out of the embrace to flip him off. As touching as this is, Dad interjected, now that everyone is here and aware that no one is dead. He looked specifically in Remus and Roman's direction. The expression on his face was one Roman was very familiar with from his childhood. Roman grimaced even before Dad continued with, Would anyone care to explain themselves? In a dark tone. Uh-oh. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 23. Would anyone care to explain themselves? Logan asked the room, filled with the most frustrating human beings he'd ever met. He must have infused his voice with the desired amount of ire, because everyone in the room seemed to wince simultaneously, except, No thanks, Remus chirped. Logan shot him a tired look and stepped forward. Wait, Dad, no! In a move he'd been using since Remus was a rambunctious child, Logan swiftly put him in a headlock. We're going downstairs, he told the others. His son was a bit wiggly when Logan started to pull him toward the elevator in the other room, but he didn't actually put up a fight. In fact, the wiggling usually meant he was pleased with the attention. He let Remus go when they got to their destination. The elevator was small enough that they ended up taking it in 2 groups. Logan ended up in an elevator with Lena, his sons, and his brother. There were a couple of moments of awkward elevator music. I am very displeased with everyone in this elevator, Logan informed them all. No one responded but Patton, who patted him on the arm. Logan turned on him. You are at the pinnacle of my ire. There were a few seconds of drawn-out silence, and then Patton removed his hand. Wow, he said after a moment. You could hear a pinnacle drop. Kids, you no longer have an uncle, Logan said coolly. That's right, Patton said with a smile, despite the glare Logan was sending him. You only have a punkle now. Roman snorted out a laugh, but quickly looked away when Logan glared at him. The elevator came to a stop, and they climbed out of it. You all go to the conference room while I wait for the rest. Except you. He pointed at Lena and her bloody nose. Fred can debrief me. You go get that checked out. She shot him a thumbs up. because apparently the lack of respect for his authority had rubbed off on her, and wandered off towards medical. Roman said tentatively. Yes, Logan asked, already even more tired. Also, Janice may or may not have a broken rib. At least he said he might have. Why on earth is he walking around then? Roman just shrugged in response to Logan's question. And send someone down to look at Janice, apparently, he called after Lena right before she turned the corner. Anything else pressing? He asked the three still with him. No? Then I'll see you all in the conference room in a few moments. Conference room 16 or 17? Remus asked. Remus, everyone here is aware that room 17 is a broom closet, Logan said. No one is falling for that again. Remus shot him finger guns. Conference room 17 it is, he said, turning to strut down the hall. Roman shot Logan an awkward half-smile before following after his brother, and Logan's own brother jerked forward to smack his lips against Logan's forehead before waltzing off after them. Why was his family like this? He turned to wait for the elevator to go back up to the factory and down again. He crossed his arms as it arrived. You're injured? Logan asked as the doors opened. Most of the occupants looked confused, but Janice looked slightly annoyed. Remus, he muttered. Roman, actually, Logan corrected. I'm having someone sent down to look at you. Don't even try to argue right now. You're second on my list today. Remus is first? Janice asked. Of course Remus is first. Where am I on the shit list? Remy asked with interest. Somehow only fifth. Score! But you're inexorably moving up. But I'm not in the top 3. No, my children and brother fill the spots above you. You said I was second, Janice said with a frown. Yes, Logan said. Also, you're grounded. Then he turned to walk through the conference room. Wait, Logan, what does that mean? Janice asked his back. It means Logan owes me a buttload of child support, said Remy. I am not your kid. You are not my dad. Sure, son. When Logan made it to the correct room, his family was already hard at work making his life a series of aggravations. Patton and Roman were already bent over some sort of project that involved markers, but Remus was missing. Before even stepping into the room, he turned to the opposite side of the hallway and opened the door to the supply closet. Get in the correct room before I make you get into the correct room, Logan said. Come on, Dad. You know it's not nice to force someone out of the closet. On most days, Roman would not have found that at all funny, but today, for some reason, it elicited a snort of surprised laughter. Remus smiled up at him from his seat on the floor like he always did when he'd done, or thought he'd done, something clever. Don't, Logan warned, wagging a finger at him and trying to smooth the smile off of his face. It was difficult since his chest was light with the relief of everyone he cared for being relatively unharmed. Don't. That doesn't mean you are forgiven. I am very, very unhappy with you. Remus just kept grinning. I am relieved that you are safe and happy to have you back with me, Logan said, but I am also very angry. That's fair. Now get out of the closet. Remus found it fit to obey him for the moment, and stood, following him to the conference room where the others had gathered. Patton had somehow found a stack of name tags somewhere, and had managed to convince Roman to help him draw little pictures on them along with the names. Patton stuck one with a broom drawn on it onto Remus when he came in. He noticed Virgil's had a knife drawn on it, and Remy's was a cup of coffee. Logan's own was, aggravatingly, a mobile phone. Remy and Frederick were currently forcing Janice into a chair while Roman avoided the glare the injured man was sending at him, and Emil was talking quietly to Virgil. Okay, Logan said. Let's start with the ones who haven't started to explain yet. Roman? My phone got broken, probably somewhere between Janice tackling me and hitting me in the face. Oh, is that why Dad texted me about where you were 1,000 times? Remus asked. Yes, Logan said, and you said you didn't know. I didn't say that, actually. Remus. I was in the middle of something, and then I forgot. And then it ended up at the bottom of a lake, Roman said. And then it ended up at the bottom of a lake, Remus agreed, along with Roman's car and us for a minute. You drove your car into a lake? Logan asked Roman. He felt like his eyes were going to start twitching. "Is that why you're all wet?" "Yes, he did," Remus said. "Hey, no," Roman said. "I managed to stop the car before it went into the lake. It's not my fault the guys behind us aren't as good drivers as me and slammed into us." "Roman destroyed another car," Remus crooned, and there was the eye twitch. "What's that, 3? And you say Janice is cursed." "I take no responsibility for the Taurus or for this one. 2's a coincidence, 3's a pattern," Remus sang joyfully. Logan shook his head at them and chose to look over at Janice instead. "And you?" he asked. "You looked at your mission details and never responded." "You were trying to send me on a wild goose chase when my brother was missing." He tried to stand up, and Remy pushed him back down again. "I was trying to get you in a controlled environment before telling you of the issues for fear you would overreact and do something careless if you found out on your own." "I already knew," Janice growled, "and that is not your call to make." Logan considered that. "Perhaps it wasn't," he agreed. "But you still should have attempted to communicate with me, at the very least, so I would have known you were okay. For all I knew, Nelson had caught you in a lie and your cover had been blown." "It is blown," Janice muttered. "I smashed her phone, blew up her car, and disobeyed her. She sent men to kill me." That information was honestly a relief in a way. Janice had been in danger constantly while being a double agent, and Logan had grown more than fond of the man in the past few years. Not having to play nice with Barbara all the time would do him some good. "We'll have to reassign you," Logan said, "as well as Remus, and you'll both need new permanent residences." "We already decided we're getting an apartment together," Remus said. "You decided," Janice said weakly, clearly not actually interested in protesting, but needing to keep up appearances. "And we're going to get a kitty." Logan said. "Well, in that case, I would highly suggest you verify it is, in fact, a kitty before you allow it on the premises. I have made that mistake before." "You love Raphael," Remus claimed. "Possum," Roman explained at Janice's questioning look. "In fact," Logan said, "it may be advisable that Remington consider moving as well. Nelson very much knows where you live, and will likely be unhappy with your continued existence. At least you should consider taking up residence somewhere else temporarily. For tonight, I'll get everyone set up in some of the rooms in the base, but that will come later. For now, we need to get everything sorted out. I have a good overall idea about what happened at this point. Is there any other important information I need to deal with immediately?" Most everyone shook their heads, and Logan was about to move on to getting more detailed reports when Remus raised his hand. "Yes?" Logan asked. "There are 2 of Barbara Nelson's men tied up in the trunk of Lena's car," he offered. "What?" Logan asked. "They were the guys shooting us that caused Roman to drive into the pond." "I did not drive into the pond," Roman said. "You were shot at?" Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 24. Logan had kept them in the meeting room for literal hours, pausing only to feed everyone except Patton and Virgil, who had actually eaten dinner. Eventually, he decided he was satisfied with the explanations. Well, no, perhaps not satisfied. He was still very displeased with everyone except Virgil and maybe Emil, though Emil had not helped himself when he'd realized that he'd spoken to both Patton and Remus in the grocery store near Remy's house, and he and Patton had proceeded to go off on a tangent about pasta, and had taken them all to some of the hotel-style rooms in the base. The room Remy, Emil, Janice, and Virgil were in had 2 double beds. Virgil and Janice had claimed one of the beds already, and were currently curled up together on it, both asleep. Janice had apparently picked up Virgil's stuffed spider from home and stuck it in his pocket. He had ordered Remy to dry the slightly damp toy with a hairdryer before consenting to lay down. The 2 of them had fallen asleep easily after their long days, the stuffed spider laying on top of Janice's chest, and Virgil's arm thrown around him loosely. Emil had stayed up longer and taken a shower before emailing his receptionist asking her to cancel all of his appointments for tomorrow, or today, as it was by now. He climbed into a bed only a couple of minutes ago, leaving Remy the only conscious one in the room. Virgil stirred awake as Remy stood up from the chair he'd been sitting on and stepped toward the door. "Dad?" he asked. Remy took a detour to stand by his bedside and stroke a few of the curls that were still damp from his shower away from his face. "Go back to sleep, kid." "Where are you going?" he asked. "Just gonna go grab some coffee," he said. "It's night," he pointed out. Remy cracked a grin. Yeah, well, you know me. He tapped him on the nose. I'll be right in the mini kitchen outside. Okay, Virgil agreed, laying his head back on Janice's chest. Janice never stirred, dead to the world in the way he only ever was when Virgil was snuggled up against him. Remy closed the door quietly behind himself and wandered over towards the kitchen. Can't sleep? Patton asked when he stepped into the little area. The man was sitting at a small two-person table with a mug of what looked like tea and a box of Oreos. Having trouble chilling out, Remy replied. You know how it is. Patton hummed in acknowledgement as Remy investigated the coffee maker. You know, Patton said, amused, if you're trying to calm down and sleep, coffee may not be the best solution. Babe, do you know me at all? Remy asked. Patton just shook his head. Besides, Remy continued, who said I was planning on sleeping any time soon? You should try to sleep, Remy said, frown clear in his tone, even though Remy was turned away, putting coffee grounds into the machine. Says the man already out here eating cookies at 1:30. Touché. They were silent until Remy's coffee was finished. Remy poured himself a cup and went to sit across from him. Thanks for not shanking the little bastard on sight. Patton's nose scrunched. I should have known he was yours with that mouth of his, Patton said, and then shook his head. He's a cute kid. He held a knife to your neck. Patton shrugged. It's not the first time I befriended someone with a deadly weapon on me, he said. He pushed the pack of Oreos over to him. I hope you realize I'm filing for joint custody. Remy laughed. I figured after I heard you spent over 3 hours in a car with him. I'm going to teach him not to curse and why falling asleep during a kidnapping is not ideal. Well, Remy's already tried his hardest on the first front, so good luck. And the boy likes to nap at inopportune times, what can I say? Takes after his dad. I am both insulted and flattered simultaneously. Patton giggled softly. But seriously, Remy said, I do owe you for making sure Virgil was okay, even if you didn't know he was my spawn. Patton shrugged. You don't know me anything. He paused. Well, you could buy me some cheese, since I just bought a bunch to make mac and cheese, and it all went bad during the long car ride. Remy snorted. Why do the lactose intolerant fear no God? He asked. But sure, I'll be happy to reimburse you and endorse your hedonistic ways. Patton smiled at him and finished off his tea. Despite his suggestion that Remy head to bed a few minutes before, he did not put his cup in the sink, but filled it back up with water and popped it into the microwave. Remy turned back to his coffee for a moment, and immediately felt arms come around him. Thanks for not being dead, Patton said into his ear. Remy chuckled and patted his arm. You're welcome, Patty. But really, what did everyone expect? I've got a couple of kids to raise still. Patton just hummed and kept hugging him until the microwave beeped. He grabbed his mug then and popped another tea bag into it. So, not what you planned for your weekend, huh? Remy asked. Patton shook his head, sitting back down. I was going to make the mac and cheese and watch reruns of Parks and Rec, he said wistfully. Then he grinned. I probably would have still been awake at this hour anyway. Oh, Pat, how many times have you watched that show? Patton just smiled at him, eyes sparkling. We really should try and get some sleep, Patton said. Yeah, well, Emmy snores. Him low kicks, Patton said, when he's not trying to crush me. Not that trying to sleep in the same bed as one of the twins is any better. Remy snorted. Didn't take Logan for a cuddling type. Oh, he always tries to deny it, but he's a big softy. Explains why I'm not dead all over again. Patton agreed. Then he grinned. I have the Netflix app on my phone, he divulged. We're starting with season 3. Of course, Patton agreed, pulling out his phone. They got yelled at in the morning by Logan for falling asleep at the table. Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow, Chapter 25. Who's Virgil? Patton asked, his voice all innocent and sweet. The boy hiding in the cabinet below him, who, as it just so happened, was named Virgil, closed his eyes and banged his forehead ever so lightly on the inside wall of the cabinet, and let out a long but quiet sigh. At least Patton hadn't outright given him up as soon as Dad asked where he was, but it was a close thing. There was a long pause between the adults above him. You're in on it, accused his dad. In on what? I've just been decorating this cake. Patton, this isn't funny, Dad said. Despite his words, he couldn't seem to not stumble over a couple of laughs as he asked, Where are the children? What's a child? Patton. Sorry, Remy, I seem to not know what you're talking about. Oh, you are so Remus's uncle, Dad bit out. Virgil, he called. Janice! Disaster twins! A pause. Where is the car? Virgil bit his lip to keep from laughing. I know you took it! If it's at the bottom of a body of water for a joke, I will end all of you. What are you talking about, Remy? Patton asked. Dad did not bother to engage with that one. Virgil, you don't technically turn 16 for another 3 hours. Do you want to make it there? Janice? I still don't know who this Virgil person you're talking about is. Oh, you know, curly black hair, listens to emo music. Dad paused. Sometimes goes by the alias Bob V. Anxiety. Oh, Bob, Patton said. Yeah, he's hiding in this cabinet. Traitor! Virgil squeaked as the cabinet door was ripped open. Come here, you little monster. Dad yanked him out by the ankles onto the kitchen floor. Virgil tried to scramble away, but there was no use. He was pinned in between a wall, and a very cross-appearing father crouched next to him. You can't, Virgil said, as the man pulled down his sunglasses to look at him. It's my birthday. Oh, I know very well it's your birthday, you little shit. Where is the car? How should I know? Virgil asked, having found out about the car by accident over a month ago. It was a surprise for me, wasn't it? You're getting old. Maybe you misplaced it. You should have tried that one before you ran away and hid in a cabinet. Which was fair, but Virgil thought he'd try. That last-ditch plan foiled, Virgil met his father's eyes. I'll never talk. Oh, Dad chuckled darkly. Never's a long time, kid. Your double agent has betrayed you, and your accomplices have abandoned you. Ouch! The flip-flop that had been lobbed at the back of Dad's head fell to the ground next to them. Dad whipped around to catch sight of the figure disappearing into the other room, and Virgil valiantly tried to use that opportunity to escape, to no avail, as Dad caught his wrist the next moment. Nice try, Jan, he called after the figure. I'll get you later. I know where you live. Logan came in the back door then, looking very confused about the scene in front of him. He'd been in the backyard when Dad decided it was time to reveal the surprise used car he'd bought Virgil for his 16th birthday. Of course, Dad had not known that when Virgil and Janice had distracted him earlier, Remus and Roman snuck away from Virgil's party to go hide the car. Logan had probably seen Virgil, Janice, Remus, and Roman take off after slamming and barricading the human door on the garage to give them more time to escape. What exactly is going on? Logan asked. It seems someone, Dad reached out to poke him in the face, found out about his birthday surprise and enlisted your demon children to play a prank. He bent down closer to Virgil. But if it's waterlogged, I will ground you for the rest of your life. Virgil couldn't help but laugh. Remus, despite all appearances, was good at subtlety. He'd been slowly ribbing Dad for the last month that the car would end up at the bottom of a pond like the golf cart, which had the desired effect of making Dad think they'd purposely driven it into a pond as soon as it came up missing. I swear to God, Virgil, where is the car? I'll solve this, Logan said easily. He walked over to the pantry. There was a squeak from inside. Roman, he said, voice firm. Now, Virgil did have to admit Logan could be scary when he wanted to be, but he still made a nose of protest when a voice said, It's at Uncle Patton's apartment. Boo! Remus said immediately, popping up from his own hiding place and pointing an accusing finger in Roman's direction. Weak link! Weak link! Uncle Patton squealed first. Uncle Patton's a traitor. You're weak. It's worse. Is there a reason Janice just ran by me, said you saw nothing, and hid in the empty cooler out front? Uncle Emil asked as he came in from the living room. Dad turned to Virgil. He patted him on the cheek. I admire your tenacity. You're still going to be punished. Like, you're my dad punished, or you're a bastard punished? Virgil asked. Virgil, Patton said, scandalized. Oh, now you know his name, Dad said, rolling his eyes. And the second, but... He stood up from his crouch. For now, I have a different child that needs to be punished first. With that, he grabbed an ice tray out of the freezer and stalked away. Finally free, Virgil got to his feet and pouted at Patton. You betrayed me! Aw, sorry, kiddo, Patton said. I couldn't resist. I'll make it up to you with birthday kisses. No, Virgil whined as Patton leaned in to smack a kiss to his cheek. No birthday kisses. Fiend! Remus said, jumping forward to whack his uncle on the head with a cardboard tube from a paper towel roll. He darted around a startled Patton to grab Virgil's hand. Come on, Emo, let's make our escape. He paused at the door to look back at Roman and lobbed the cardboard tube at him. Weak links don't get to come. Roman yelped, and Remus tugged Virgil into the living room, but then seemed to lose interest in the game because he plopped down on the couch face first. A cat immediately hopped onto his back. "Aw, hello, baby," Remus said, turning his head to let the cat rub its face against his cheek. Diesel Fuel, his and Janice's kitten, made a pitiful mewing sound. "I desire nothing more than to pet you, but alas, you are pinning me on my stomach, and my arms bend not in that way." She mewed again, even more pitifully. Virgil took mercy on both the suffering beings and went over to pick her up, scratching her ear as Remus moved to sit up so Virgil could sit next to him. Diesel Fuel immediately put her front paws on Remus's thighs, keeping her back ones in Virgil's lap. Remus obediently started to scratch under her outstretched chin. It was a few minutes of cat petting later that the front door slammed open, and a very unhappy and slightly damp Janice came inside. Virgil snorted. "What happened to you?" "Remy dumped ice on me," he said sullenly. "Ice goes in the cooler," Dad said. "It's not my fault you were in the cooler." Janice grumbled something at him and threw himself dramatically down next to Virgil. This attracted the attention of Diesel Fuel, who turned to him and immediately abandoned the people who had been valiantly petting her to climb into his lap. She moved to lick a wet spot on his shirt. "This isn't helpful, animal," Janice groused, but didn't move to make her stop or get her off of him. "Aw, does the pretty kitty love her daddy? Yes, she does," Remus cooed. "I despise this creature," Janice replied, petting the top of her head. "I caught him giving her little head kisses last night," Remus informed Virgil. Virgil giggled. "You saw nothing of the sort," Janice spat. "I'll break your kneecaps." "I really wish someone in this family could just tell people and animals that they love them in a normal way," Uncle Emile said, stepping into the room. "Ew," Remy and Virgil said at the same time. Emile rolled his eyes. "Despite the distractions, Patton managed to finish decorating our cake," he told them. Virgil had learned in the past almost year that Patton actually could not cook for anything, but he could decorate things wonderfully. So the cake had been a team effort, with Uncle Emile doing the actual cooking and Patton providing the decorations. "Want to do candles?" Virgil nodded and got to his feet. Janice picked up Diesel Fuel, and they all made their way to the kitchen, where Roman, Logan, and Patton already were. Virgil sighed when he saw the cake. It was beautiful. It was also covered in cows that had birthday hats on them. Patton was already hard at work lighting the 16 candles on the cake and smiled at him when he stepped up. "We are singing Happy Birthday," Uncle Emile said. Virgil pouted at him. "Of course we are," Patton said. Virgil then got to endure the horrible fate of having the Happy Birthday song sung to him before being allowed near enough to the cake to blow out the candles. Patton carefully removed the candles and set them aside. Then Virgil's head was suddenly pushed forward so his face went directly into the cake. "Remy!" Patton said, shocked. Virgil's head popped up, and he glared at his laughing father. "Joke's on you, old man. Now the entire cake is mine." He licked some of the frosting off from around his nose. "And that's why we also made cupcakes," said Uncle Emile. This is the end of Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adrianna in the Snow. You can find her at Tumblr at Snowdice, and you can also find me either more on YouTube or on Tumblr at Kyra Elason. There will be links to both of us in the description, as well as a link so that you can read this fic for yourself, as well as the wonderful bonus content and additional stories set in this universe. Thank you for listening.